tonight. We drift down a quiet river beneath cherry blossoms in full bloom. The petals fall like whispers, brushing against the surface of the water, only to disappear without a trace, soft reminders that everything we touch, hold, or cherish will someday pass. The evening air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of moss, wood smoke, and something older still, something you can't name but feel somewhere deep in your chest. The wooden boat creaks as it rocks gently against the dock, waiting nearby. A lantern swings in the breeze, painting long shadows across the riverbank, and under that muted glow, a humble fisherman ties knots in silence. He does this every evening, but tonight is different. You can feel it, can't you? Like the stillness before a turning tide. Something quiet is coming, not a storm. No, something else. A shift, a teaching, perhaps. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, feel free to share your location and local time down in the comments. I always love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The fisherman doesn't know he's about to meet a monk. He doesn't know the boat ride will take longer than expected. He doesn't know he's about to be handed a lesson he didn't ask for. But that's how these things work, right? Wisdom never shows up on time. And when it does, it's usually disguised as something else, a delay, a problem, a person you didn't expect to talk to. He checks his lines one last time. His hands move automatically. This routine is muscle memory now. His father did it. His grandfather, too. A long line of men who watched the river and took just enough to live. Never more. A life of repetition. A life of seasons. A life that, to anyone else, might seem painfully small, but to him, it is honest still. He feels the ache, not in his back, but in the quiet hours between dusk and sleep. That aching question, is this all? And maybe that's why he agreed to ferry someone tonight. A monk, they said, just passing through, needs a ride across the water. The monk offered a few coins, but the fisherman waved them off. I'll be out there anyway, he mumbled. But the truth, he was curious. Something in him stirred. And now, as he waits, his small oil lamp flickers. The trees whisper overhead, and time just pauses. Far across the water, a bell sounds, not a loud one, just enough to let you know someone is coming. And the lesson, it's already on its way. The bell's echo fades, swallowed by the hush of water and wind. You glance upriver, half expecting the monk to appear in a swirl of mist, maybe balancing on the current itself, robes weightless in the breeze. But no, he's just a man, walking slowly down the worn path from the woods, step by unhurried step. His robe is plain, dust-colored, no grand ornaments, no flashy beads, no staff carved with dragons or anything out of place. His head is shaved, of course, but even that seems more practical than symbolic. Just a way to have one less thing to worry about. The fisherman watches him approach. The monk nods, says nothing, then steps into the boat like he's done it 1,000 times. He sits cross-legged near the bow, one hand on his knee, the other resting gently on the rim. No luggage, no scrolls, just him. You row, the monk says softly. Not a demand, Not even a request. More like an observation. And so, the fisherman rows. The oars dip in rhythm. Splash, creak, slide, splash, creak, slide. A rhythm the fisherman knows by heart. But tonight, the water feels thicker somehow. He keeps stealing glances at the monk. Who is this man? Really? You're wondering if I can swim, the monk says, not opening his eyes. The fisherman chuckles under his breath. Can you? No, the monk replies, smiling. But I can float. Isn't that enough? The fisherman squints at him, then shrugs. Not if the river doesn't care. The monk says, but the river always cares. It just doesn't show it the way you want. The fisherman says nothing. What do you say to that? They drift a while, silence folding over them like a warm blanket. The river makes its usual sounds, water slapping the boat's sides, frogs chirping in the reeds, the distant murmur of trees swaying like monks in meditation. Then, the monk opens his eyes and looks straight ahead. There was a reed once. He begins, like you might say there was a king or a soldier or a ghost, bent low by the current. It watched every other reed fall to pieces in the flood. Stronger reeds, taller ones, beautiful ones, and yet it remained. The fisherman listens. He can't help it. The monk's voice doesn't push, it pulls. The others had resisted. The monk continues. They braced themselves against the force of the water. They stood proud, noble. But in the end, they snapped. The one that bent low, it survived. It lived not by fighting, but by yielding. A splash breaks the silence as the fisherman lifts the oar again. So, bend and survive. Sometimes, the monk replies, but it's not just about survival. The reed didn't think about living or dying. It simply moved with what was. The boat rounds a bend where fireflies blink lazily above the reeds. The fisherman exhales through his nose. I don't think I'm much like that reed. No, the monk says, but you could be. And with that, he closes his eyes again. They float past a willow tree, its branches like trailing fingers, brushing against the boat. The monk's robe flutters slightly in the breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a heron lifts off the water with barely a sound. The fisherman rows slower now, not out of fatigue, but something else. A quiet curiosity has started to bloom. You speak like someone who's lost a lot. The fisherman finally says. The monk hums softly. No one learns to yield by getting everything they want. A pause. The fisherman wants to ask more, wants to peel back the layers of this stranger. But instead, he glances at the clouds. The moon is veiled now, casting only the faintest glow. The water glimmers like silk in candlelight. Where are you headed, he asks. Nowhere in particular, the monk says, but also not away from anything. The fisherman huffs. That doesn't make sense. I know. The monk replies, grinning. That's the beauty of it. They continue, the boat gliding with less effort now. The current is doing more of the work, as if it too wants to hear the next part of the story. You ever fish? The fisherman asks, more to fill the silence. I have, the monk replies, but not with hooks. Then how'd you catch anything I didn't? The monk says, eyes still closed, but I fed many. The fisherman frowns. You talk in puzzles. No. The monk says, opening one eye, I talk in weather, sometimes sunny, sometimes foggy. The fisherman stares ahead. Trees blur by. The world is moving, but not fast, like a dream with no plot. Why the story about the reed, he asks eventually. The monk tilts his head. Because you asked if I could swim. And that's the answer. The fisherman smiles despite himself. This monk is strange, but not the dangerous kind. The kind that unsettles you gently, like shifting sand under your feet. And somewhere in the distance, a frog croaks once, then goes silent again. A breeze lifts the petals overhead. One lands on the fisherman's knee and stays there, perfectly still. He doesn't brush it off. The oars don't touch the water for a while. The boat floats on its own, obedient to the current, nudged here and there by tiny eddies and the quiet breath of the night wind. The fisherman lets the handles rest on his knees, feeling the damp wood cool against his skin. The monk hasn't spoken in a while. He doesn't seem asleep, though. Just still, like he's listening to something the fisherman can't hear. They pass a bamboo grove, tall, thin stalks rising in orderly chaos, swaying slightly even though there's barely a breeze. The sound they make is soft, like dry paper rubbing against itself. The fisherman watches them bend in unison, almost like they're bowing to the passing boat. The monk opens his eyes. Do you know what karma is? The fisherman shrugs. Action and consequence. Right. The monk tilts his head. Sort of. People think karma is punishment or reward, but really, it's more like a trail. Not a judge, not a sentence. Just footprints. From where you've walked, the dirt you've kicked up, the seeds you dropped along the way. The fisherman nods slowly. So what every step I've taken brought me here. Exactly. The monk replies, though maybe you took a few circles getting here. The fisherman chuckles. A few. They drift under a branch hanging low over the river. The monk gently ducks beneath it without touching. The fisherman follows suit, then sits up again. I lost a sandal once, the monk says suddenly. The fisherman blinks. But I lost a sandal. The monk repeats. Just one. Left it at a temple after washing. Didn't notice until I was already walking down the road. He pauses, as if waiting for some kind of reaction. The fisherman just raises an eyebrow. So, the monk says. I left the other one behind too. Why? Because what use is one sandal? The fisherman grins. Could have kept it, just in case. The monk smiles. Or I could leave it for someone who only needs one. They drift for a moment, watching a moth dance in circles near the lantern. That's karma too, the monk says. The decision not to hoard, not to cling. A tiny act, but it shapes the trail. The fisherman scratches his beard. Sounds like a good story. Not much of a sandal, though. No, the monk agrees. But better to lose it with intention than drag it pointlessly. The river widens here. The current slows. You can feel the temperature drop slightly, like entering a clearing after walking through sunlit woods. The fisherman takes up the oars again and rows gently. You think all our choices matter that much, he asks. They do, the monk says, but not always in the way you expect. Sometimes you drop a stone into the water and the ripple reaches someone you'll never meet. They glide past a submerged log. A turtle rests on it, unmoving, pretending it's just another bump in the wood. My father once said fishing was all instinct. The fisherman says, but now I wonder how much was just habit, what he passed down without thinking, what I picked up without noticing. The monk's voice softens. Inherited karma. passed not through blood, but through repetition. The fisherman nods, watching the ripples slide along the hull. My son. He starts, then stops. Swallows. The monk doesn't say anything, just waits. My son used to ask me why we fish if the fish want to live. I told him not to be silly. That fish don't think like we do. But he looked at me like he knew something I didn't. The fisherman exhales through his nose. I still don't have an answer. Maybe the answer isn't in words. The monk offers. Maybe it's in how gently you pull the net. They pass beneath an arched tree, where blossoms drift down slowly, like falling stars. One lands on the monk's shoulder, and he doesn't brush it away. There are two types of suffering, he says, the kind that teaches, and the kind that repeats, and which is mine. The monk looks at him carefully. Which do you choose? The fisherman doesn't answer. The silence doesn't need filling. Eventually, the monk lifts one hand and points ahead. See that tree stump by the left bank? The fisherman squints. Yeah, I carved a word into that stump 12 years ago. It said stay. Why? Because I wanted to leave. They float past it. The word is gone, weathered down to a faint groove, barely visible. I carved it, thinking it would help me remember, the monk says. But it faded, like all things. So, pointless. No, the monk says. Just temporary. Like the urge to run. Like regret. Like sandals. They drift for another long stretch. The fisherman rows when needed, but mostly, the boat just glides. You ever miss it? The fisherman asks, suddenly. Whatever life you left behind, the monk thinks, sometimes. But missing something isn't the same as wanting it back. I can love a memory without needing to live inside it again. The fisherman leans back, lets his arms fall slack. You make it sound easy. It's not, the monk replies, but neither is clinging. They round another bend, and the stars start to peek through the thinning clouds. The moon is higher now, trailing light across the water like a path that leads nowhere. The monk shifts slightly. What if I told you everything you do tonight echoes somewhere you'll never see? I'd say that sounds like something a monk would say. The monk smiles. Fair. They both laugh softly, the sound barely louder than the creaking boat. Somewhere in the trees, an owl calls once and then goes silent. The night wraps around them tighter, not like a trap, but a blanket. And on the river, under the cherry blossoms and the stars, the fisherman keeps rowing. Not towards something, not away from anything, just with the current. For now, the river bends again, this time tighter. The boat brushes past overgrown reeds that lean into the water like old men hunched in quiet prayer. The moonlight dims as thick clouds gather overhead, but the water stays calm, its glassy surface reflecting the barest shimmer of silver. Ahead, a cluster of lanterns flickers faintly through the fog. The fisherman squints. There's a village up ahead. He murmurs, hasn't been anyone living there in years. The monk's eyes stay closed. Then why are the lanterns lit? The fisherman doesn't answer. His grip on the oars tightens slightly, but he keeps rowing, even as unease prickles down his spine. The closer they get, the clearer the shape of the village becomes, a narrow strip of houses hugging the riverbank. Old tiled roofs sloped low, porches sagging from time and weather. The buildings look more like memory than architecture, faded, softened, hollowed out by silence. They drift to a slow stop near a wooden post that still holds the cracked remains of a docking rope. The fisherman ties the boat with quiet hands. "I used to deliver fish here," he says. "When I was younger. Good people. They used to leave tea and rice out for me when I arrived early. Then one year, flood came through, just swept everything, no warning." The monk steps lightly onto the dock, his feet making almost no sound. He glances down the empty pathway between houses. Places disappear, but attachments linger. They walk slowly into the village. The lanterns aren't lit with fire. Not really. It's the moonlight catching the old paper that makes them glow. An illusion. The fisherman chuckles dryly. "Ghosts," he mutters. The monk doesn't disagree. They stop at what used to be a tea house. The sign still hangs crookedly from one rusty nail. Inside, the bamboo floor creaks with each step. A single teacup still sits on a shelf, its rim chipped, a line of dust drawn around its base. The monk picks it up, turns it gently in his hands, then sets it back. "Nothing here belongs to anyone anymore," he says. The fisherman nods. "Yeah. And yet, sometimes I still expect someone to wave from a doorway." They walk further, passing the blackened remnants of a shrine, offerings long crumbled into ash, incense sticks snapped or scattered. Yet the air is thick with stillness, as if the prayers whispered here haven't yet let go. "I knew a woman who lived here," the fisherman says softly. "Widow. Laughed like rain. Used to say nothing's permanent. She'd lost a husband and both sons before she turned 30. Called herself a feather in the wind." The monk stops walking and faces him. "Do you think she suffered?" The fisherman thinks. "She must have, but she wore it lightly, like it didn't own her." Then she understood. The monk says, "Impermanence isn't just about loss. It's about freedom. When you accept that everything ends, you can finally stop clinging." The fisherman looks down at his hands. They're calloused, worn, stained from years of holding nets, tying knots, cleaning fish. Hands that have held on to habits, to grief, to silence. They step into a small courtyard, now half swallowed by moss. In the center, an old plum tree leans sideways. Roots crack through the stone. The monk sits at its base. The fisherman hesitates, then joins him. They rebuilt this village twice. The fisherman says, "Each time, the river took it again. And still, they returned." The monk replies. For a while, the two men sit there, surrounded by nothing but night sounds, distant frogs, the whisper of wind through broken slats, the occasional groan of old timber shifting. The fisherman finds himself breathing slower. The space seems to stretch without changing, like the past exists here, not as memory, but as texture. "You said earlier the river always cares," he says. "But if it cared, why destroy this place over and over?" The monk watches a moth flutter past. The river doesn't destroy. It moves. It obeys the laws of the world gravity. Time, rain upstream, just like we obey our hunger, our loss, our longing. It only feels like destruction when we want things to stay. He leans back against the trunk, but nothing stays. Not the fish, not the trees, not us. The fisherman thinks of his son again, the way he used to pick up river stones, ask if the fish lived beneath them, the way he'd look up with eyes full of impossible questions. "I try not to think about it," he says. "I know," the monk replies. "I pretend it was just a fever, just bad luck. I know, but I keep hearing him, in small ways. When the boat creaks, when I wake too early, the monk doesn't speak. I don't want to forget him. The fisherman whispers, but I don't want to be buried by it either. The monk finally speaks. Then don't carry the memory like a stone. Carry it like a petal. Let it rest on your shoulder. Let it blow away when the time is right. The clouds above part briefly, letting moonlight paint the courtyard in silver. The broken tiles shimmer like water. There's no lesson in suffering by itself. The monk continues. The lesson comes in how you move through it, whether you choose to repeat it or release it. The fisherman closes his eyes, not to sleep, just to breathe. When he opens them again, the village looks smaller, less haunted, less demanding. You think places like this ever forgive us for forgetting them, he asks. The monk stands. There's nothing to forgive. Places, like people, don't need to be remembered to be at peace. They just need to be let go of, gently. They walk back to the boat in silence. The fisherman doesn't look back, not out of strength, but because for once, he doesn't need to. Back on the water, the monk reaches into his sleeve and pulls out a small object. It's smooth and round, a river stone. I picked this up when we docked, he says, handing it over. The fisherman turns it in his hand. It's nothing special, except it is. Somehow, for what he asks, for nothing. The monk replies, or for everything. The boat slides away from the village. The lanterns dim until they vanish. The petals return, drifting down again from some unseen tree. And the fisherman, holding the stone in his palm, begins to understand that what was lost wasn't gone. It had just changed shape. They drift through the narrowing river, where the banks draw closer and the world seems to lean in with them. The trees grow thicker here, branches hanging low with sleepy reverence. The water, dark and still, mirrors the canopy above almost perfectly sky, and earth folding into one. The fisherman rows less now. The current does most of the work, and that suits him fine. He sits with his hand resting lightly on the oar, the river stone tucked in his lap. The weight of it is comforting, not heavy, not pressing, just there, just enough. The monk hasn't spoken since they left the abandoned village. Not out of distance, but out of respect. Maybe. Sometimes the silence is what lets things settle. Eventually, the riverbank flattens, and a wooden platform emerges from the shadows, barely held together by vines and memory. The monk gestures slightly. "Let's stop here," he murmurs. The fisherman nods. They step ashore into a clearing where the trees part just enough to let the moonlight spill across the ground like a pale blanket. In the center sits a small stone altar, simple, unadorned. Beside it, a makeshift bench, and beyond, a shallow fire pit, cold now but still ringed with the black bones of old embers. The monk kneels and clears a few leaves from the altar. Then he reaches into his robe again and pulls out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Rice," he says, "cooked before we left the monastery." The fisherman raises an eyebrow. "You planned this?" The monk smiles without answering. They sit on the ground, cross-legged, facing one another. The cloth is unfolded slowly, revealing 2 rice balls and a few slices of pickled daikon. Nothing fancy, but in this place, under this light, it might as well be a feast. The fisherman takes his time chewing. The rice is a little dry, the daikon a little sharp. but every bite lands with the weight of ceremony. There's no hurry, there's no conversation, just chewing, swallowing, sitting, breathing. Then the monk speaks again. Each grain, and that rice, he says gently, came from rain, soil, wind, sun, from farmers you'll never meet, from tools forged by hands long gone, from seeds kept alive by generations who never knew your name. The fisherman looks down at the rice in his palm, suddenly hesitant to bite into it again. That's what we mean by dependent origination. The monk continues. Nothing arises alone. Nothing stands by itself. Even suffering needs conditions. The fisherman nods slowly. So if I suffer, it's because of many things. The monk says, some inside you, some not, some ancient, some from just this morning. The fisherman picks at a grain stuck to his thumb. And if I want to stop suffering, then you change the conditions. The monk pauses, letting that hang, but not by force, by clarity. You learn what feeds the fire. Then you stop feeding it. They eat in silence again, save for the faint rustle of trees and the occasional crack of a twig in the distance. The clearing feels like a held breath, calm, still, aware. After the last bite, the monk folds the cloth and tucks it away. You ever feel like you don't know who you are anymore? The fisherman asks. All the time, the monk replies, not missing a beat. But that's not a problem. That's clarity, too. The fisherman blinks. Clarity. To realize the you you're clinging to isn't fixed. It's just a story told by habit, by memory, by fear. The fisherman leans back on his hands, staring up at the web of branches above. So I'm not who I thought I was. No, the monk says. And you never were. He says it kindly, not as an insult, more like a soft fact. Like saying the wind will blow east tonight, or that the fireflies are out late this season. You are this moment. The monk continues. The breath you just took, the sound you just heard, the choice you're about to make. The fisherman closes his eyes, listens. A single leaf falls nearby. A cricket chirps once, then silence again. Feels thin. He whispers, "It's not." The monk says, "It's just light. You're used to carrying weight." They remain in the clearing a while longer. The fisherman doesn't feel the urge to stand yet. His body is tired, yes, but not weary. The kind of tired that says, stay here a little longer. Let the world breathe around you. At some point, the monk rises, brushes off his knees. The fisherman follows. They return to the boat, but not before the fisherman turns back for one last glance at the altar. Not out of attachment, but out of thanks. He doesn't need to say it aloud. The gesture is enough. Back on the river, the journey resumes. You speak like everything matters. The fisherman says eventually, "It does." The monk answers, "But not in the way we think. Not to build legacy. Not to win or prove. Just because it's here." The fisherman exhales. You make it sound simple. It is. The monk says, "It's just not easy." They pass a stretch of river that narrows again, the banks rising like gentle hills on either side. Moonlight filters through the trees in narrow slats now, thin as threads. Earlier, you said even suffering needs conditions. The fisherman says, "So, what if I change everything and still feel the same?" Then you keep going. The monk says, and you stop measuring your progress like a merchant counts coins. It's not linear. It's not tidy. It's a practice. One breath, one act, one bowl of rice. The boat floats deeper into the trees. A branch creaks overhead. An owl swoops past, brushing the air just above the water with wings that make no sound. And somewhere behind them, the clearing fades. The altar vanishes into shadow, but the lesson that remains, not as a rule or a quote, but as something quieter, like the warmth of rice in your belly, like the aftertaste of daikon, like the way the oars don't fight the current anymore. The clouds return, slow and heavy, dimming the moonlight to a dull pearl. The river grows quieter still, as if holding its own breath. Even the frogs have stopped calling. Only the rhythmic creak of the oar and the soft lap of water against the boat remain heartbeat sounds, steady and ancient. The fisherman pulls his shawl tighter around his shoulders. The air has changed cooler, thicker, brushed with the scent of damp leaves and distant rain. The monk shifts slightly, but says nothing. They both sense it. Something is coming. Not danger, just a change in tempo. The boat glides toward a shrine, barely visible through the mist, set just above the riverbank. It leans slightly, as though bowing toward the water. Its roof is covered in moss, stone lanterns flanking either side like sleeping guardians. The fisherman nods toward it. I've passed this place for years, never stopped. Then tonight is different, the monk says softly. They tie the boat loosely to a stump and climb the slippery steps. A small roofed alcove shelters a faded statue hands folded in prayer. Expression serene, offerings old, but present lie at its base. Wilted flowers, pebbles, a crumbling biscuit still in its wrapper. Perhaps someone still visits. Perhaps memory alone maintains the ritual. Inside the shrine, time feels stretched, not slowed, not stuck, just stretched, like each second holds more than it usually does. The monk bows low, then settles into a seated posture near the altar. The fisherman stays standing a while longer before joining him. The wind rises, bringing the first taste of rain. A few drops splatter onto the wooden floor through cracks in the roof. The trees rustle louder now, but it's not panic, just the voice of the forest, waking a little more. And then, gently, the monk speaks. There once was a man who suffered terribly. He begins, voice low and calm. Everything he loved, he lost. His health, his home, even his children. He searched far and wide for a cure to his grief. But every teacher gave him riddles. Every priest gave him prayers. The fisherman listens, arms wrapped around his knees. One day, the monk continues. He found an old woman at the edge of a cliff. She lived alone, spoke rarely, and owned nothing but a small bowl and a blanket, but she looked peaceful. He asked her the secret. She offered him a single question. The monk leaned slightly forward. She said, "Are you willing to stop believing this suffering is special?" The wind rushes across the shrine then, filling the silence her words leave behind. The fisherman frowns. What does that mean? The monk answers slowly. That pain is real. But the story we attach to it, the idea that it shouldn't be happening to us, that is where most of the suffering lives. A crack of thunder rolls distantly. The rain begins to fall in earnest now, tapping the wooden roof with a syncopated rhythm. The monk continues. We suffer twice. Once from the wound, and again from the belief that we shouldn't be wounded. The fisherman nods, slowly. So you just accept it. Accept that it's here. The monk says, you don't have to like it. You don't have to pretend it's sacred. But see it. Touch it. Let it be real, without feeding it with resistance. The fisherman watches the rain slide through a crack and collect in a shallow groove on the floor. A miniature river forming, right there under his feet. You think I carry that second kind, he asks. The monk gives a small smile. Don't we all? They sit in silence again, surrounded by wind and rain, the soft sighs of a shrine too old to complain about its age. The fisherman presses his palm against the floor. It's cool, solid, and yet it feels like it's vibrating, just slightly life beneath stillness. Tell me, the monk says after a while, have you ever been caught in a storm with your net full? The fisherman laughs, surprised. More than once. And what did you do? Covered the catch, he says, held on tight, prayed the net didn't tear. Did it help? Sometimes, he says. Other times I lost the whole thing. And were you angry? The fisherman's eyes narrow with memory, always. First at the river, then the sky, then the fish, then myself. The monk nods. But the storm didn't come for you. It came because conditions made it. Same with your grief. The fisherman picks at a splinter in the wood. Hard not to take it personal when it takes your child. I know, the monk says. And yet, the fisherman echoes. The rain continues its soft applause. The wind fades slightly. The forest hushes again. The monk stands. Let's walk a moment before we leave. They step back outside. Rain drips from the eaves. The path behind the shrine is narrow, but walkable. Moss cushions their steps. It's not long before they reach a small pond nestled in the hillside. Lotus leaves float on the surface, trembling with each raindrop. The monk gestures. Do you see how they hold the rain? Just for a moment, the fisherman watches the leaves. Each one collects droplets until plop they spill over and vanish. They never cling. The monk says, even when full, they're ready to let go. A wind gust sends ripples across the surface, and suddenly the fisherman sees the leaves differently. Not as decorations, not even as plants, but as a way of being, of receiving without grasping, of releasing without drama. They return to the boat, shoes soaked, robes dripping, but neither man seems to mind. As the fisherman pushes off from the dock, he glances at the monk, that man at the cliff. He says, did he ever find peace? The monk's face softens. He learned how to suffer without drowning, and sometimes that's enough. The fisherman rose in silence. The shrine vanishes behind them, swallowed by trees and rain. But the pond remains in his mind, and the leaves always ready to release. The river grows wide again, and the clouds begin to drift. A sliver of moonlight peeks through, enough to paint the water in streaks of silver. The monk settles into stillness once more, and the fisherman, soaked to the bone, feels a strange warmth inside his chest. By the time the rain lifts, the river has changed again, no longer narrow and cloaked, but open, reflective, and wide as memory. Dawn is still far off, but the dark has shifted somehow. You know that feeling, right before sunrise, when the world doesn't look different yet, but somehow feels it. That's where they are now. The fisherman yawns, not from exhaustion, but from softness, like the night has started to let go of its grip. like he's finally stopped clenching something he didn't know he was holding. They pass a cluster of lotus blossoms, resting quietly on the water's surface. Their petals are folded in sleep, just like the world around them. The monk sits straighter, his eyes half lidded, as though he's watching the river from somewhere far away. He speaks gently. There was once a woman who lost everything in a fire. The fisherman blinks. The monk hasn't spoken in hours, but here he is now, voice low and steady. She returned to the ashes of her home and found only a cooking pot intact, blackened, bent, still whole. The fisherman listens. No questions this time, just breath, just attention. She sat in the ruins, held that pot in her lap, and wept. Not for the pot, not even for her home, but for the illusion she'd believed that anything could stay. The river slips beneath them like silk. Days later, the monk continues. A man from the next village found her still there. He asked if she needed help rebuilding. She said no. She'd decided to live right there, among the remains, until her sorrow became something else. The fisherman raises a brow. Did it? The monk nods. In time, her sorrow became a kind of soil, and eventually, a flower grew there. He gestures toward the lotus blossoms, now glowing faintly in the softening dark. She named that flower the first noble truth. The fisherman leans his elbows on his knees. Suffering exists. Yes, the monk says, but not as punishment, not as failure, just as part of things. The boat drifts near the edge of a broad sandbank. A narrow footpath leads away from the shore into what looks like a field of tall grass and scattered stones. The monk gestures again. "Walk with me," he says. They step off the boat, the sand cool and firm beneath their feet. A short walk brings them to a still pond, shallow and ringed with flat stones. At its edge, a small wooden bench half sinks into the earth. A few reeds sway beside it, untouched by wind. The monk kneels beside the pond and touches the water lightly. The ripples echo outward clean, simple, alive. "I once met a widow who came here every morning," he says. She had lost her daughter to a winter sickness. Came to this pond for 49 days. Just sat. Didn't speak. Didn't weep. Just watched the surface of the water. The fisherman stands nearby, silent. One morning, the monk continues. She reached into the water and released a small cloth doll, one her daughter had carried since birth. She watched it float, then sink. The monk lifts his hand and traces the ripple of memory in the air. From that day on, she never returned. The fisherman studies the water, so she let go. No, the monk replies. She let be. The difference lingers. You talk about suffering like it's a teacher. The fisherman says. It is. The monk says, but not the kind that scolds. The kind that waits. Offers you the same lesson, over and over until you stop turning away. The sun is still hidden, but the sky to the east is lightening soft grays, giving way to pale blue. They sit on the bench, the wood damp, the silence companionable. Have you suffered? The fisherman asks, eyes on the horizon. The monk smiles faintly. I've lost people, places. I've lost versions of myself I thought would last forever. But I no longer call it loss. I call it change. The fisherman looks at him, and that makes it easier. No, the monk says, but it makes it truer. They return to the boat without a word. The pond behind them grows still once more. As they glide again, the fisherman asks, You said the woman named the flower the first noble truth. What about the others? The monk folds his hands. The second the cause of suffering is craving, the third suffering can end. And the fourth, there's a path out of it. A path. The fisherman echoes. Not a ladder, not an escape. Just a way forward. Step by step, they drift under another canopy of trees, branches arching over like cathedral ceilings. The boat floats so smoothly now that it almost doesn't seem to move. I don't know if I'm ready to let go. The fisherman admits. You don't have to be, the monk says. Just be ready to stop gripping harder. And with that, they fall quiet again. A single bird calls from the treetops. The fisherman closes his eyes, listening not just to the sounds around him, but to the soft shifting within him. It doesn't feel like resolution. It doesn't feel like peace, but it feels like space. And sometimes, that's the beginning of both. The sun has not yet risen, but the world has shifted. The sky has turned that ghostly shade of lavender that only comes after hours of darkness. You've seen it before, the moment when the night exhales, just before the day draws its first breath. The trees no longer lean like giants over the water. Instead, they seem to stretch upward, tall and thin, as if preparing to receive the morning. The boat moves steadily through this space between hours. The fisherman's grip on the oars is easy now, his shoulders loose, no urgency, no resistance. The current knows where to go. But then, without warning, the boat jolts, a sudden tug from below, a shudder that shakes its wooden ribs. The fisherman reacts instantly, drops the oars, leans over the edge. The current hasn't changed, but something's off. He pulls the line in hand, only to discover his net has snagged on something. He braces, tugs harder, and the wooden beam beneath his feet creaks with the strain. Snap. The net splits down one side, the weight of it spilling into the river with a splash too loud for the hour. Bits of torn twine drift in the water, and with them, the last of the night's catch. Silver flickers vanish below the surface, gone before he can blink. The fisherman curses under his breath. Instinct. Habit. That old rope-tight sensation coils up in his chest. It's not about the fish. Not really. It's about the sudden loss. The rupture of control. The way things slip when you thought you had them held just right. He stares at the empty net for a long time. Then the monk, who hasn't moved, says, "Let it go." The fisherman doesn't answer. There's no need to chase what's already swimming away. The fisherman still doesn't respond, but he doesn't tug again. He lets the net drift. It was a good net, he mutters. It served its purpose, the monk replies. They drift in silence for several minutes. The air is different now, cooler, but with the scent of morning dew. The river widens again, giving way to flat reeds and open sky. On the left bank, a figure stands knee-deep in the water. A boy, maybe 10 years old, shirtless, with a simple satchel across his chest. He's using a woven basket, dipping it into the water and lifting it up, watching intently for signs of life. The fisherman steers closer. He knows this part of the river. There's no village nearby, just fields, and further down, the edge of the forest. The boy looks up as the boat approaches, but doesn't speak. His gaze is calm, measured. "You fishing?" the fisherman calls. The boy lifts the basket again, empty. He shrugs. "Not really." The monk nods toward the boy. May we come ashore? The boy gestures with his chin toward a small, flat rock nearby. An invitation, casual and precise. They step out of the boat, and the fisherman immediately notices the ground here is softer mud mixed with fine silt. It sticks just enough to remind you you're standing on something that moves. The boy sits on the rock, still holding the basket. "Why do you do it?" the fisherman asks, "if you're not trying to catch anything." The boy smiles faintly. "I'm just practicing." "Practicing for what?" "For letting go." The monk chuckles softly. The fisherman stares at the boy. "Where'd you learn that my grandfather used to say it?" The boy says, "He'd come here every morning after my mother died. Said he needed to get good at losing things." The fisherman sits on a nearby log, stunned by the simplicity of it. The boy dips the basket again. A fish brushes the bottom and slips through the gap. He doesn't flinch, doesn't sigh, just lifts the basket and watches the water drip away. The monk kneels by the river's edge, tracing circles on the surface with his finger. He understands emptiness. The fisherman snorts. He's 10, and already more at peace than most grown men. The monk replies. The boy stands, slings the basket over his shoulder. "I'll be going now." He walks up the embankment and disappears into the tall grass without looking back. The monk and fisherman sit in his wake, the silence returning, but somehow fuller now. Emptiness isn't what people think. The monk says, it's not the absence of things. It's the absence of clinging, of grasping, of expecting. The fisherman stares at the river. So losing the net, that's empty, too. It's the start of it. A single bird cries out above, slicing the silence. A heron, wide-winged, drifts across the sky. "I've been trying to hold so much," the fisherman says. "My son, my guilt, my father's voice, even my habits." "And how does it feel?" the monk asks. "Like I'm drowning," he admits. "Then let go," the monk says again. "Not all at once, but a little. Like the boy, like the fish, like the basket." The fisherman closes his eyes. In the quiet, he feels a tension release not in his shoulders or his jaw, but somewhere deeper, somewhere near the place where memory becomes habit. He inhales, then lets it go. The monk rises, brushes the mud from his robe, and gestures toward the boat. They board again, quieter now, not because of sadness, but because something has shifted. Like a wheel that started turning in a new direction. Like the current has changed its course just enough to matter. The torn net lies coiled in the boat's center, but it doesn't feel like failure. It feels like the beginning of something else. The monk reaches out and gently folds the edges of the net inwards, as if tucking it in for rest. And the fisherman, for the first time in many years, doesn't feel the urge to fix it. Not yet. Not now. Instead, he picks up the oar and rows gently into the spreading light of morning. The river brightens, not suddenly, but like a long-held breath finally being exhaled. The sky has shed its lavender tint for a pale gold that seeps into the water, brushing every ripple with warmth. The trees now stand in silhouette, and the first edge of the sun glows just above the horizon, soft as the belly of a sleeping cat. The boat slides gently through the glowing current, and the fisherman rows as though the water itself were inviting him forward. No push, no pull, just presence. The monk rests, with one hand trailing over the side of the boat, fingers skimming the surface lazily. "You've been quiet," the monk says. The fisherman nods. "Feels like talking would get in the way." "Then let's not talk," the monk replies. "Let's remember." And so they do, without words, without effort. But memory doesn't always need prompting. Eventually, the fisherman speaks his voice low, not urgent. "There was a morning like this," he says, "when my boy was still small. We were in the boat, just the two of us. He wanted to catch a fish by himself, without my help. So I gave him a line and told him to wait. The monk listens, still and open. He waited all morning." The fisherman continues. "Didn't move, didn't complain, just stared at the line like it was magic. And when nothing bit, he looked up at me and said, 'That's okay. The fish have things to do.'" He chuckles softly. I didn't understand it then. Thought he was just being kind. But now, I think he knew something I didn't. The monk nods. Children often do, but they forget when we teach them not to. The boat glides into a stretch of river framed by weeping willows. Their branches kiss the surface, trailing in soft arcs. A few petals float by, carried from some hidden bloom upstream. The scene is so still, it feels like the world has paused to listen. The fisherman pulls the oars in. The boat slows. "I never cried," he says. The monk waits. "After he died, I never let myself. Not once." The monk turns slightly to face him, because it felt like weakness. The fisherman shakes his head. "Because I was afraid if I started, I'd never stop." A long silence follows. The river doesn't mind. It keeps flowing, as rivers do. "Do you want to cry now?" the monk asks, his voice gentle. The fisherman doesn't respond right away. His eyes stay on the water. "I think I already am," he says finally. "Just not the kind that shows." The monk nods once, then turns back toward the horizon. That, too, is a form of release. A flock of birds takes off from the far shore, scattering into the morning like thoughts leaving the mind after meditation. They float on, the fisherman saying nothing more for a long while, but his shoulders sit lower, his brow has softened. They pass a cluster of smooth rocks jutting out of the water like sleeping turtles. The monk points. "Shall we stop here?" The fisherman steers the boat gently toward the shallow bank. They tie it off and step onto the rocks. The sun is higher now, low enough to bathe everything in gold, but bright enough to warm their skin. The monk walks ahead to a patch of moss, then kneels and touches the ground. "This is where I sat," he says. The fisherman joins him. "When years ago?" The monk replies, "After my brother died." The fisherman looks over, surprised. The monk rarely speaks of himself. "I came here with the same feeling you carry, that nothing made sense anymore. That nothing ever would." He runs a hand across the moss. "I screamed here, alone, cried until I had no voice. Then I sat, and eventually, I felt something shift. What my relationship to the pain." The monk says, "It didn't disappear. It didn't become sacred, but it became bearable, a companion, not a curse." The fisherman presses his hand into the moss. It's cool and damp, yet strangely comforting. Like the earth itself understands. "What if I don't want to let go of him?" he asks. "Then don't," the monk says. "Let go of the idea that letting go means forgetting, or dishonoring, or healing perfectly." The wind rustles through the trees. A few more petals drift past. "Let go of clinging," the monk adds. not of love. The fisherman closes his eyes, and for the first time, pictures his son not as the child he lost, but as someone he's still in conversation with. Through choices, through memory, through silence, they return to the boat, the rocks behind them now simply another part of the journey. The river widens again, and in the distance, rooftops begin to appear the edge of the fisherman's village. He looks toward them with a strange mix of feelings. Not dread, not comfort, something in between. "You think I'll be different?" he asks. The monk tilts his head. "Not different, just more awake." The fisherman grins. "That sounds worse." They both laugh. The river carries them forward, and the wind rises slightly. It smells of pine, of warmed earth, of home. As the rooftops grow closer, the monk speaks one last time in this stretch. "You'll return to the same bed, the same boat, the same shores, but something inside you will respond differently." That's the beginning of transformation. The fisherman exhales deeply. "I think I'm ready. Not for everything," the monk says. "Just for the next moment. That's enough." The boat drifts on, and ahead, the village waits not to change him, not to judge, not to greet, simply to be there when he arrives. The boat glides through the final bend in the river, the same bend the fisherman has taken countless times before. But this time, it feels slower, more deliberate, as if the river, too, knows something has shifted and is giving him space to arrive gently. The rooftops of the village come into view, familiar, weathered, bathed in morning light. Smoke curls from a few chimneys. Someone sweeps a porch with lazy strokes. A dog stretches in the dust, yawns, then flops back down, unimpressed by the return of anything. But before they reach the dock, the monk taps the edge of the boat. "Let's stop here," he says, gesturing to a small bank a few yards before the pier. The fisherman raises an eyebrow, but steers toward the edge without question. The grass is high, damp with dew. Birdsong trembles softly from the trees above. They step onto land for the last time together. The monk walks a short distance into the grove, where a single cherry tree stands, its branches heavy with pink blossoms, many already carpeting the ground below like a fallen sky. The fisherman stands still, watching the petals flutter down, some caught in midair, some resting lightly on his shoulders. Everything ends, the monk says, but look how it ends gently, beautifully, without fear. The fisherman steps closer. Why here? Because this is where you realize you never owned any of it. Not the fish, not the boy, not the grief. The monk lowers himself to sit beneath the cherry tree. The fisherman joins him without speaking. They sit side by side as the blossoms fall, caught in time's quiet rhythm. "You know," the monk says, brushing petals from his lap, "people think awakening is a flash of lightning, but it's usually this, a soft landing, a gentle knowing, the kind that doesn't need to shout." The fisherman watches a petal spin in the air, landing on his hand. "It doesn't feel like a revelation," he says. "It's not," the monk replies. "It's a remembering of something you always knew, but forgot how to feel." They sit for a long time, saying nothing more. The monk's robe shifts quietly in the breeze. The fisherman's eyes drift shut, then open again, not in resistance, but in observation, just seeing, just being. Eventually, the fisherman rises, brushes off his legs, looks down the path that leads back to his home. His boat, tied loosely on the bank. The village, waking. He turns to the monk. Will I see you again? The monk smiles. In every falling petal. It's not an answer. Not really. But it's enough. The fisherman starts down the path. No hurry, no wait, just footsteps. As he walks, his shoulders no longer carry the tight rope of grief. The memory of his son doesn't sting as sharply. It's still there, but now. It walks beside him, not behind. He reaches the dock, unties the boat, and guides it to its place, the same way he always has, but everything is different. He looks once more toward the grove. The cherry tree sways, the petals fall, and then he turns toward his home, the day ahead, and all the ordinary moments waiting to be seen with new eyes. And now, dear listener, there's nothing left to do. The river has carried us as far as it needed to. The stories have been told not to teach in any loud or forceful way, but to rest in you, slowly, like silt settling on the riverbed. You've followed the journey of a humble fisherman who thought he was simply ferrying a monk across the river. And in a way, he was. But as you've seen, the real crossing was not over water, but through memory, sorrow, and something quieter, something you might now feel in your own chest. Maybe you too have carried grief like a tangled net. Maybe you've chased answers like flickering fish, only to realize that the current has been holding you all along, that the answers were never meant to be held tight, but felt lightly, like petals on skin. Tonight, we let go of needing to understand. Tonight, we remember the monk's quiet wisdom that things do not need to last forever to be meaningful, and that we do not need to fix everything in order to be free. Let yourself breathe now. Let the stillness stretch. Imagine the riverbank, the cherry blossoms falling, the soft hush of water slipping past the boat, the faint scent of moss and earth and wind. You are there too. You are always there. So rest now, in this space between thought and sleep. Let the breath move gently in and out of your body, like the tide. Let the fisherman return to his village in your imagination wiser, perhaps, but still himself, still walking, still listening. You, too, will return to your world, your own home, your own path. But tonight, you have remembered something timeless, that everything passes, that everything matters, that everything is already enough. May your breath stay soft, and may all that you carry be as light as a falling blossom. Next story. We drift quietly into the wooden belly of a Zen monastery tucked somewhere in the snowy hills of Kyoto. You're barefoot, padding softly across the polished planks of the kitchen floor, where the moonlight spills through slatted windows and puddles beside an iron pot. The scent of damp cedar lingers in the air, mingling with faint traces of rice vinegar and roasted sesame. It's still dark outside, and the world is barely breathing, but inside, something is already awake. The Zen cook doesn't speak. He never does at this hour. He moves like steam, without hurry, without pause. You watch his hands roll open the rice barrel, fingers brushing against centuries of ritual. Each grain scooped is a tiny universe, he once said. Though you're not sure if he ever meant for you to hear it, your task is simple, be here. Listen to the way water laps gently against the old clay basin. Notice how the rice sighs when it's rinsed for the third time. Feel how the room seems to inhale each time the cook exhales. No one rushes. There's nowhere to go. The kitchen is the journey. Somewhere in the back, a bamboo ladle knocks against a kettle. Outside, a crow stirs in its sleep. You're not dreaming, not yet. But the line between waking and dreaming is growing soft, like rice left too long in warm water. He folds his robe tighter, ladles out a final rinse, and looks not at you, but through you, like he's checking if you've begun to see it. The freedom in all this repetition, the silence that's hidden in every scrape of spoon against pot. You think of the teachings, the Four Noble Truths, how even suffering wears the face of a dull blade in a dirty dish. There's a lesson here, not in grand sermons, but in soaking, rinsing, boiling, karma, maybe, and the burn marks on the wok. Impermanence in the crust of yesterday's stew. Liberation, strangely enough, in a single grain of rice stuck to the wall. Outside, the first temple bell sighs its slow, bronze yawn. Not to wake anyone, just to let the universe know it's still turning. You've already forgotten when you stopped thinking and just started being. The steam begins its slow ascent, swirling around your cheeks like morning breath on a frosted window pane. You're still in the kitchen, but the world outside has turned a soft gray. The cook lifts the lid from the iron pot, just a fraction, letting heat roll upward. His face stays passive, unreadable, the way mountains always seem to know something they'll never tell you. Rice cooking isn't a task here. It's a conversation wordless, steady, sacred. The pot hisses. The wooden ladle rests on its side like a sleeping animal. You sit on a small stool, knees tucked beneath your robe, watching as a single droplet of water skates down the handle of a clay jug and disappears. He picks up a tofu block next. It's soft, pale, and perfectly square, like a cloud, forgot how to float, with the care of someone unlearning speed. He slices it into cubes, each one almost precisely the same. Almost. One corner curls slightly. Another has a small dent. He doesn't correct them. He just lets them be. There's freedom in that too. You recall the Buddha's teaching suffering often grows from craving perfection, but the tofu doesn't care if it's a perfect cube. And neither does the cook. His fingers move like he's seen this tofu before. In another lifetime, maybe. Or maybe just yesterday, but it doesn't matter. Time in this kitchen is soft and stretchy. It folds over itself like warm dough. Steam from the rice thickens. The whole room smells of earth and faint sweetness. Miso paste joins the mix, stirred slowly into broth. The cook scrapes a bit of it into a small wooden bowl and sets it aside not to taste, but to remember. He often saves a spoonful like that. Some monks say it's an offering to the unseen. Others say it's a lesson in detachment to make, to serve, to not consume. Outside, snow starts falling again. Not the cinematic kind. This snow is slow, unhurried, like it has nothing left to prove. You watch it land gently on the windowsill, tiny white petals on dark old wood. The cook drops slices of daikon into the soup, one by one. They sink slowly, turning the broth milky, then clear again. You find your breath following that rhythm, sink, rise, pause, just like the daikon, just like the steam. There's a moment where nothing moves at all. Not the ladle, not the cook, not even you. It's the kind of silence that isn't empty, but full. You think of dependent origination not as a theory now, but as a feeling. The tofu came from soybeans. The soybeans from soil. The soil from time, decay, sunlight, clouds, rain, maybe even the bones of someone long gone. You're not just watching soup. You're watching the past arrange itself into the present. You remember something the old abbot once said while rearranging rocks in the garden. This isn't cooking. This is returning. The kitchen creaks a little. A kettle clicks. The firewood shifts. These are not interruptions. These are verses in the monastery's quiet poem. And the cook still moving, still here, still not asking for applause. He's lighting the stove for another dish now, thin slices of lotus root, sautéed in silence. They sizzle briefly, release a scent like morning rain hitting stone, then go quiet. You didn't know food could do that, startle and soothe in the same breath. You wonder what freedom feels like. Not the dramatic kind with banners and declarations, but this kind. A quiet freedom that smells like miso, feels like steamed rice between your fingers, and arrives without anyone announcing it. The cook lifts the lid one last time. The rice is ready, but he doesn't serve it yet. Instead, he covers it gently again and bows just slightly, almost imperceptibly, to the pot. You follow his gaze to the pot's curved edge. It's old, blackened in places, chipped in others, but it has never failed to cook rice. Not once. Maybe that's the point. In this moment, you realize that every object in this kitchen holds a memory, a purpose, a lesson. Not in the grand, dramatic sense, but in the quiet way a spoon knows how to rest. The bowls are stacked now, miso soup carefully poured. You carry one with both hands. It's warm, not hot, not scalding. Just the right kind of warm, like kindness pressed into ceramic. You sip slowly. The broth tastes of salt, soil, and time. You think of karma again. Not punishment, not reward, just taste, action, result, a natural echo. The cook doesn't sit. He never does. He leans against the counter, eyes soft, watching snowflakes melt on the glass. Maybe he's meditating. Maybe he's just existing. You realize those two things might not be different anymore. Outside, someone rings the morning bell, not the wake-up bell, the "we are still here" bell. Steam curls around your bowl like it's trying to remember its cloud days. And you're warm, full, and strangely clear. The rice, the steam, the cook, they didn't teach you anything in words, but they've untaught you a lot. The knife rests on its block, silent and content, its edge glinting just slightly in the muted morning light. You've stayed behind in the kitchen while the others filtered out, bowls cleaned, breakfast digested, talk kept to a minimum, but not silence. Never silence. This monastery doesn't ban talking. It simply prefers you listen harder. You follow the cook again as he prepares for the next cycle. The rhythm continues. Water pours. Blades whisper. And the day stretches ahead, simple and repetitive to anyone else, but to you now. Layered. Alive. Astonishing. He selects a cabbage. That's it. A cabbage. Pale green. Crinkled leaves. Still a little dirt on the stem. But something in the way he holds it makes you feel like you've never seen a cabbage before. It's not worship. It's not drama. It's just attention. Complete attention. The knife finally moves. Slow. Deliberate. The sound it makes against the cutting board is clean. Honest. Not a single wasted motion. The cabbage opens up like a blooming lotus, layer by layer. You've chopped vegetables before, maybe while thinking about taxes, arguments, shopping lists. But this is different. You are watching mindfulness with a blade. You blink and recall the Buddha's lesson on right effort, not force, not obsession, but the balanced energy that sustains without strain. The cook's hand never tenses. He isn't cutting the cabbage. He's simply helping it become what it already is. There's a pile of discarded leaves beside him, wilted, yellowed, slightly bruised. He doesn't toss them out. He gathers them slowly, rinses them in a bucket, and places them in a bin for compost. Nothing wasted. Not even the unwanted. You start to wonder, what parts of yourself have you been throwing away because they looked a little bruised? The thought trails off as a gust of wind rattles the shoji screen. The next task is carrot slices. A mountain of them. Orange coins waiting to become something else. The cook lets you help this time. He doesn't instruct, just hands you the blade and watches. You hesitate, then begin. Your slices are clumsy, uneven. Some tilt, some crumble. One shoots off the board entirely. You grimace, but he says nothing. He simply turns away and starts chopping scallions with soft, sharp clicks. That, too, is teaching. So you keep going. Eventually, your hands find a rhythm not perfect, but yours. And the knife starts to hum, just a little, as it moves through the carrot's flesh. Each cut becomes a breath. Each breath becomes the moment. And in that moment, you begin to understand impermanence, not in the tragic, poetic way, but in the literal way. A carrot goes from whole to gone, slice by slice. The soup that follows is made from everything you chopped. It smells of salt, roots, and something you can't name. Maybe presence, maybe peace. As the soup simmers, you're sent to scrub a giant iron pan. Not glamorous, not mystical, but necessary. You crouch by the washing basin, warm water numbing your hands. The pan is old, heavy, crusted with bits of burnt rice and memory. You begin to scrub. At first, your mind wanders. To-do lists sneak in. Old regrets knock on the door. But you bring it back to the pan, to the pressure in your wrist, to the soft circular scrape of bristle against metal. This is your meditation now. The pan, the scrubbing, the wet sleeves, the ache in your spine. It isn't spiritual. It's just real. Halfway through, you pause. Not because you're tired, but because the pan shines. Not like new. It will never be new again. But the burn marks are gone. And in their place is something smoother, something honest. You exhale. You didn't know a clean pan could feel like a clean slate. The cook returns, nods once at your work, then places a small cloth over the top of the soup pot. The broth has stopped boiling, but its warmth remains. You ladle out a bowl and sit by the open window. Outside, the snow has turned to slush. Birds begin their casual commentary from the rooftops. Somewhere in the monastery, a bell rings for mid-morning meditation. You don't move. The soup tastes better than before. Not because of spices, but because you helped make it, and the making changed you. The cook joins you, cradling his own bowl like a monk holds an ancient sutra. He doesn't speak. He doesn't have to. You're both just here, and it's enough. Behind you, the pan dries quietly. The cutting board waits for lunch. The kitchen, like the mind, is never truly finished. It just rests sometimes. Later, while peeling lotus roots, You think again of the discarded cabbage leaves. You saved them. You gave them purpose. Maybe parts you thought were mistakes can be like that too. The wind shifts sometime in the early afternoon, and with it, a hush settles over the monastery. You're standing near the back doorway of the kitchen now, watching flurries of soft snow glide sideways across the old temple roof. Each flake seems to hesitate before landing like it, too, is caught in the pull of stillness. The cook has lit a small fire near the stone basin where rice water usually drains. Today, he's boiling barley and daikon, the kind of lunch that doesn't draw attention to itself, just warm, filling, humble. You sit beside him, knees bent, watching the steam rise, then disappear into the white haze outside. A bell chimes faintly, just one tone. The midday sit has begun. Most of the monks have shuffled into the zendo, but the cook stays behind. He stirs, pauses, stirs again. You don't ask why, because by now you understand he is meditating. His cushion just happens to be a wooden bench. His mantra, a barley ladle. He sets the spoon down and walks to the window, where a tray of dried burdock root rests, soaking. You follow his eyes as they land on the old pine tree just beyond the courtyard. Its branches sag under the weight of snow, but never crack. The tree doesn't resist. It simply yields. There's a lesson in that too. You glance back at the cook, wondering how many lessons he's absorbed without ever reading a scroll. His robes are simple, stained near the sleeves from years of broth and soy sauce. He brushes flour from his apron without urgency, as though time doesn't push him, only purpose. And yet, for all his groundedness, you've noticed it the way his hands still tremble just slightly when washing bowls. Age, maybe, or memory. He begins rolling dough for temple dumplings, each motion slow and circular. The flour rises in soft clouds around his wrists. You lean closer and start shaping your own clumsy at first, but passable. Don't pinch the edge too hard. You hear yourself think, as if the dough were a metaphor for something more fragile than food. You both work in silence. Outside, the snow has stopped, replaced by an almost translucent light. Everything glows faintly, like the whole world has just exhaled. Suddenly, one of the dumplings bursts in your hand. Too much pressure. You stare at the collapsed edge, then at the cook. He says nothing, but the corners of his mouth hint at amusement. He slides the ruined dough into the compost bowl, same as before. Still nothing wasted. Still no judgment. You keep going. When the dumplings are lined up and steaming, he lifts the lid and releases their fragrance into the air, ginger, sesame, and something earthy. The scent fills the room like music played too quietly to dance to, but just loud enough to change your mood. The cook lays out 2 bowls and gestures for you to sit. He ladles the broth carefully. A few dumplings per bowl. No flair, no garnish, just what's needed. You eat slowly, noticing the textures, chewy skin, warm filling, delicate bitterness from the greens inside. Each bite, a small reminder nothing lasts, but everything returns. You remember something from your first week at the monastery, a lesson in non-attachment. Hold everything like you hold a dumpling, someone had said. Firm enough to shape, soft enough not to crush. It hadn't made sense until now. The cook refills your bowl, then his own. He's not watching the food. He's watching the steam. And then, mid-bite, he speaks not loudly, not even clearly, just a whisper. Snow melts, he says, and so do thoughts. That's it. No lecture, no riddle, just an observation, like someone pointing out a bird overhead. You want to reply, but realize you don't need to. You've started to understand what kind of conversations happen in this kitchen. The kind where silence is not a gap in the story, but the thread holding it together. After the meal, you carry the bowls to the basin. The water's still warm from earlier, and you watch the broth spiral down the drain like ink in a calligraphy lesson. You scrub slowly. No hurry, no need to get to the end, because you're already in it. Later, you sweep the floor. The broom slides softly over the worn wood, catching rice grains, errant threads, maybe even your old thoughts. There's a kind of meditation in sweeping, a rhythm, a whisper. You imagine the broom's bristles as brushstrokes, and the floor beneath you a giant canvas, not blank, but layered every step, every crumb, every drop of spilled tea a mark of living. You think back to the morning, to the tofu, to the cracked ladle, to the rice grains stuck on the wall. All of it sacred, all of it mundane. And that's the real secret, isn't it? Not escaping the ordinary, but folding into it. Even now, the cook is working, folding clean towels, wiping the tea kettle, adjusting the angle of a bamboo whisk so it leans just so in the corner. There's care in every movement. Even the snow outside seems to fall in better alignment now. You close your eyes for just a moment and hear it again, the ladle against the pot, the bell in the distance, the soft crunch of fresh snow under straw sandals. You are not dreaming. You are simply awake in a different way. And the cook, still silent, still present, watches the tea boil. The tea boils quietly in the corner, the flame underneath low, constant, almost meditative in its flickering. The day has stretched itself thin. You feel it now, not tiredness exactly, but softness, like the whole monastery has exhaled and taken you with it. Outside, the snow lies undisturbed, a pale mirror of the sky above, and the pine tree still holds the silence in its limbs. The cook pours matcha powder into the ceramic bowl measured, careful, as always. His hands cradle the bamboo whisk, and with the gentlest motion, he stirs the tea into life. You sit across from him on the floor, knees folded under, watching the green spiral form in the bowl's curve. He sets it in front of you with a nod. You bow, both hands on the rim, and lift. The tea is warm, slightly bitter, slightly sweet, like earth that still remembers the sun. You sip in silence, and he does too. His gaze lowered, the steam tracing soft curls between you. It's in this space, this quiet, unfussy moment, that something changes. Not outside, inside. Because the tea doesn't taste like transformation. It tastes like now, like this exact second, and nothing else. The air holds still. The light in the room tilts slightly, touched by the last moments of afternoon. You've lost track of time, but you've also stopped caring. There are no hours here, only actions, only breaths. The cook stands and returns the bowl, rinsing it gently. He moves with the same attentiveness he used this morning, the same rhythm he used when slicing daikon, folding cloths, setting rice to steam. And it dawns on you not just as an idea, but as an ache you're grateful to feel that this is what freedom looks like. Not escape, not achievement, but presence. You look around. The kitchen, cleaned and quiet, glows with a soft humility. The counter, once crowded with vegetables and pots, now lies bare. The cutting board has dried. The broom leans by the doorway, already forgotten but always ready. You step outside for a moment, pulling your robe tight around your chest. The snow crunches beneath your feet. The cold bites, but not cruelly. It simply reminds you that you're alive. The courtyard is empty. A line of sandals rests neatly beside the temple door. A few prayer flags twist in the breeze, barely moving. You turn your gaze upward. The sky stretches forever, pale and endless. Somewhere, a hawk cries, and then vanishes behind the clouds. And that's when you remember the rice, the pot from this morning, the lid lifted, the steam, the grain. It's still there in your mind, warm, perfect, full of a kind of wisdom that doesn't use words. The cook steps beside you now. He's holding something in his hand, a small bowl. Inside it, one single grain of rice. Not a metaphor, not a performance, just one grain. Saved, offered. He hands it to you without explanation. And you understand. You take it between your fingers gently, like you'd hold the wing of a dragonfly, and place it on your tongue. It dissolves slowly, but not completely. Just enough to remind you that some things linger. Back inside, the cook returns to his bench. He doesn't sit. He doesn't speak. He simply folds his hands behind his back and watches the snow begin again. You settle onto your cushion and let your breath move without instruction. In, out, in, out. Nothing spectacular, just living. You remember how the Buddha spoke of liberation, not as a dramatic awakening, but as the ending of clinging. And here you are, in a wooden kitchen, surrounded by bowls, steam, memory, and you've let go. Not of everything, not forever, but enough. You think of all the things you once believed freedom required: adventure, ambition, approval, but none of them are here, and yet you are, whole, clear, still. The cook lights a single candle as dusk deepens. The flame dances, then steadies. You feel the stillness now, not as absence, but as fullness, as if the silence has been waiting all this time for you to notice it. The candle flickers, the light bends, and in that moment, you understand this was never about rice. It was always about seeing. And now you do. The snow thickens outside, soft as ash, gentle as breath. The monastery grows quieter with every minute, like a hand gently pressing down on the spinning world. Inside, the kitchen is dark, except for the flicker of a single flame. You're lying back now, your body heavy in all the right ways, your breath slow, stretched long like the shadow of a mountain. There's no more tea, no more knives, no more bowls to scrub. Only the distant creak of old wood and the sigh of the wind slipping past paper walls. You feel it now, how the world doesn't need you to rush, to fix, to prove. It simply asks you to witness, and so you do. Somewhere in the hall, another bell sounds low, round, echoing across the courtyard like ripples across still water. You don't react. You let it move through you, like warm air, through an open sleeve. The image of the cook returns, still standing by the empty rice pot, hands folded, robe loose. His breath is slow, his eyes soft. He's not thinking about tomorrow. He's not thinking about anything. He's just being, and so are you. Outside, Snow blankets the pine branches. Beneath that snow, the needles still breathe. The tree holds no resistance. It bends when it must. It sheds when it's ready, just like you. Let yourself settle now. Let your muscles melt into the floor. Let your mind drift like steam rising from warm rice. The day is over. The tasks are done. You've cooked. You've cleaned. You've sat beside silence and remembered what it feels like to be whole. No one's asking you to change. No one's asking you to solve. Just rest. Let the warmth of the kitchen stay with you. Let the softness of the cook's hands, the curve of the old spoon, the glow of the candlelight follow you into sleep. You're not broken. You're not behind. You are in this moment, enough. And maybe that's the truest teaching of all. Next story. We begin in a vast desert where heat ripples off the sand like breath, and the horizon stretches farther than the eye or the mind can chase. The sky is a slow burning canvas, brushed with fading amber, while the dunes lie in endless, silent meditation. Somewhere among them, a lone figure walks. No destination, just motion. The weight of something heavier than the pack on his shoulders questions. Regret. Maybe even a faint hope that the desert might answer him, or at least outlast the noise in his chest. You hear the crunch of his sandals against the dry earth. The wind moves like a whisper, slipping over his ears, carrying nothing and everything at once. He's been walking for hours. Day's time doesn't mean much out here. What matters is the thirst of the body, of the soul, and the strange feeling that something is watching or waiting just beyond the next rise. You've been walking alone for so long that silence has become your only companion, and yet you're not entirely sure you're alone anymore. There's a hush in the air, the kind that always seems to arrive before something shifts. The sand ahead looks no different, yet your feet slow. Maybe it's intuition, maybe it's exhaustion. You reach the crest of a dune and blink against the last golden shards of light. Down in the hollow, half shadowed by a grove of date palms that should not be here, yet are a man sits, cross-legged, still, not sleeping, not meditating in the way you've seen travelers do by the fire. He's simply there, as though he's been waiting for the sun to catch up with him. You pause. Maybe you hallucinated him, but he turns his head gently in your direction, not startled, not curious, just present. And you feel your chest tighten not with fear, but with a strange pull, like the way your hand reaches for water without thinking. You descend slowly, your steps quieter now. The man says nothing, but your breath feels different just being near him, lighter, somehow. Your pack seems less of a burden, or maybe that's just the wind again, playing tricks. You sit nearby, close enough to feel the breeze from the tree leaves above, far enough to respect the quiet between you. He nods once, a gesture that says, "You're here. That's enough." The sun slips away. The desert changes from flame to velvet. You still haven't spoken. Neither has he. But something inside you already has. The night deepens, and the temperature drops as quickly as the light did. Gone is the furnace of day now. The desert exhales cold silence, and every grain of sand seems to listen. You glance again at the seated man beneath the palm. He hasn't moved. not even to brush away the small flecks of sand the breeze stirs onto his robe. It's as though he belongs to the landscape, or the landscape belongs to him. It's hard to tell which. You shift your weight, your legs ache, your lips are cracked, but somehow you're not in a rush to drink or speak, just to be here, in this strange quiet, with a stranger who feels older than the desert itself. And then, like a branch bending in soft wind, his head turns. His voice doesn't pierce the silence, it slides into it. "You've brought something heavy," he says, not as a question, but as a fact. His voice is low, worn at the edges like stone, rounded by centuries of water. You hesitate, unsure whether to answer with your name, your story, or just a nod. He looks at you with a soft patience, not waiting for your reply, exactly just holding the space where it might come. You reach slowly for your water pouch, offering it in a quiet motion, unsure why. It's mostly empty, but somehow giving it away feels like a beginning. The man accepts it with a slight bow, raises it to his lips, and pours a few drops into his open palm. He lets the water trickle through his fingers and into the dust. You stare. That was all you had left. True generosity, he says, as if reading your thoughts is offering what is already empty. You blink, your mouth dry with more than thirst. Is this riddling madness, or a kind of clarity that lives just beyond your own thinking? Stillness returns. You sit in it. Moments pass, maybe minutes, maybe more. The desert doesn't keep track for you. Then, without a word, he stands and begins to walk. No direction, no command, just the quiet expectation that if you want to know more, your feet will follow. You rise too, without knowing why. The sand squeaks beneath your steps. You trail behind him, the sky deep indigo above. The moon hasn't risen yet. Only stars, thousands of them, each like a soft bell in a cathedral sky. As you walk, your mind churns. You think of your past, what drove you here. A loss, maybe, or the fear of becoming someone you didn't recognize. You had questions, but no one to ask them to. No one who didn't answer with noise, plans, maps. But this man, he has no map, just movement. He leads you toward a rise in the sand, where the wind forms delicate curls like breath exhaled slowly. At the top, he stops, points with 2 fingers at the earth below. There, below the ridge, is a wide bowl of smooth sand, no stones, no footprints, just space. You see the way the wind shaped this hollow, he asks. You nod, and how even in silence something is forming. You don't answer. You're watching the curves, the way the wind sculpts gently, without demand. He speaks again. This is the mind before clinging, before the story, before self. You feel something shift in your chest, like a puzzle piece sliding into place, but not completing anything, just loosening what was once tight. You sit again beside him. The wind combs the sand. He picks up a stick and draws a circle. Inside it, he draws another, then another, smaller, and smaller still. Then he wipes them away with one swift motion of his palm. He doesn't explain. You don't need him to. You sit with it. The story bubbles up in your memory. One from your childhood, about a man who crossed the desert in search of gold and found only silence. You never liked that story. It felt empty. Now, you're beginning to wonder if emptiness was the point. After a long pause, he begins to speak, not in metaphor, but in memory. I once walked as you do, he says, chasing answers that would not sit still. His voice is slow, each word balanced like a grain of sand placed on a scale. I thought peace was a prize, he continues, something earned by struggle, by outthinking pain. He looks at you then, but the desert teaches you that the mind, like sand, cannot be grasped. Hold it, and it runs through your fingers. You feel that in your body, in your bones. He closes his eyes. So do you. And suddenly you feel it, the wind as breath, the stars as silent witnesses, your thoughts as birds that come and go without needing to be named. You are not separate from this night, not a visitor, but part of it. The desert, the stranger, the silence, even your thirst, they all feel like limbs of the same body. And you're just beginning to remember how to listen. The wind dies down as if it, too, is sitting to listen. The stillness grows heavy in a comforting way, like a warm blanket rather than a burden. The man stands again, slowly, and begins to walk along the curve of the hollow dune. You rise and follow, your legs now used to moving in silence, in rhythm with something you no longer need to name. The stars wheel above. You notice constellations, not because you recognize them, but because they feel placed, not random. Someone or something arranged them like candles in a cathedral. A quiet reminder, even the vastest spaces are composed with care. You walk until the sand gives way to rock. The landscape rises, not into mountains, but into solid ridges. Places the sand has not yet softened. The stranger touches one such rock as he passes. He pauses, placing both palms against it. Listen, he says. You tilt your head. There's nothing to hear. No sound echoes back. Just the chill in the stone, the weight of it. But then you realize the stone is the sound. The silence of something that has endured. Something that has changed slowly, yet remains. Even this was once sand, he says, fingers brushing the rock's surface. You nod, though your throat tightens. You think of yourself, how the world has shaped you. How sometimes you've hardened not out of strength, but defense. How you've mistaken stillness for stuckness. Change is not the enemy, he says, as though following your thought. It's only the nature of all things. He moves again, leading you through a narrow corridor where the stone walls breathe cold air. You walk single file, the rock rising high on both sides. It's a canyon, formed over millennia by wind and water no longer present, a memory of erosion. This passage is karma, he murmurs. You frown gently. A path carved by choices, he shakes his head. A path carved by conditions. He stops to face you. Imagine this canyon formed not because the wind had a plan, but because wind met weakness in stone, and water followed. Over time, the shape was born not out of punishment, not reward, but response. He gestures behind you, and we, too, are shaped by loss, by joy, by fear, by love, not because we deserve, not because we lack, but because the world meets us, and we meet it again and again. You breathe that in. Somewhere deep in your chest, the knot you've carried begins to soften. I thought karma meant blame. You admit that I was being punished for something, that my pain had to come from somewhere. He nods gently. It did come from somewhere, but not from guilt. From conditions. Yours, the world's, your parents, your choices, your habits, your reactions. He pauses, and once you see that, you are free. free. The word rings strange in your ears. You don't feel free yet, but you do feel held, not by him, not by the world, but by an understanding just beginning to emerge. He leads you out of the canyon into a clearing where the moon finally rises huge, round, and heavy with light. You hadn't realized how dark it had gotten until now. Moonlight coats the sand like silver rice paper. Everything glows with soft edges. You blink, adjusting. He sits again, this time on a smooth stone at the center of the clearing. He motions for you to sit opposite him. You do. He reaches into the folds of his robe and pulls out a small clay bowl. He places it between you. This bowl, he says, was made by a man who thought he was broken. You glance at the bowl. It's simple, uneven. A faint crack runs along one side. Repaired with gold. Kintsugi, he explains. A Japanese potter's art of repair. The crack is not hidden. It's honored, made beautiful. Not in spite of the break, but because of it. You swallow hard. You've never felt so seen by an object. He came to me once, the man continues. A wanderer like you, lost, angry, hurt. He wanted to throw the bowl away, said it was no good. You stare at the golden line. What did you tell him, you ask? The man smiles softly. I told him the truth, that his story did not end with the break. He runs a finger along the rim, and neither does yours. The desert breeze moves again, soft as breath on the back of your neck. You close your eyes, not from fatigue, but from a wish to hold this moment inside you. To drink it in like water you forgot you needed. After a time, you open them again. The man is gazing up at the moon. You follow his eyes. In Zen, he says, we don't chase the moon. We watch its reflection in still water. You picture it a bowl of calm water catching the silver glow, shimmering with light that isn't its own, yet somehow belongs. That reflection, he says, is your mind. When agitated, the moon breaks apart. When still, you see it clearly. You let that sink in. Your thoughts have been ripples for days, months, maybe years, trying to solve, trying to outthink pain. But here beneath this moon, beside this stranger, you begin to feel the ripples settle, not disappear, just soften. Stillness is not escape, he adds, as if hearing your thoughts again. It's a return. You breathe deeper, slower, not because you're told to, but because your body finally has room. He places the bowl in your hands. Keep it, he says, but not as an answer, as a reminder. You look down at the gold running through the crack, a line of history, a line of healing. You cradle it in your palms, the clay still faintly warm from his hands. And for the first time in a long time, you feel something inside you is also beginning to mend. The bowl rests in your lap, warm against your palms, as if it carries a pulse of its own. You trace the gold that snakes through its flaw, your fingertip moving slowly, reverently. It's not just a vessel, it's a story, one that mirrors your own in a language without words. You sit in silence with the monk, because by now, you know that names aren't the point. His presence is as steady as the moonlight spilling across the sand, the kind of quiet that doesn't make you lonely, but whole. Eventually, he stands, not abruptly, not as command, as invitation. You rise, tucking the bowl carefully into a cloth and slipping it into your satchel. It's strange you carried only dust and questions into this desert. Now you carry silence and gold, neither weigh much. Yet you feel transformed by them, You follow him as he walks past the stone where you sat, past the canyon that carved karma into your memory, and toward a thin trail barely visible beneath the sand. The path slants upward. Each footstep lifts you from the hollow of doubt and toward a higher plane, not just in altitude, but awareness. The horizon opens like an old scroll being unrolled, full of lines and shapes that suggest a destination without revealing it. As you walk, he speaks again quietly, gently, as if offering thoughts not to instruct, but to share the second noble truth, he says, is often misunderstood. You glance at him. That suffering comes from desire, you ask. He nods, but not all desire. He clarifies, not the hunger that leads you to food, not the thirst for meaning. It's the grasping, the clinging, wanting things to stay when they must go, or to come when they are not ready. He pauses as a breeze stirs the hem of his robe, wanting the wind to blow a certain way when it never asks your permission. You both smile faintly at that. He continues, this clinging, this refusal to let things be as they are, creates a tension inside us, a friction, a tightness around the heart. You feel it now, not as metaphor, as memory. All the times you wish someone had stayed, all the moments you replayed, wishing to rewrite them, all the futures you imagined, gripping them too tightly to see clearly. It's like holding a rope, he says, and the more the world pulls away, the tighter we clutch. But the burn on our hands is not from the rope, it's from the refusal to let go. The image lands hard. It stings because it's true. You've been gripping for so long. Even your dreams are calloused. But letting go, you say, feels like losing. He shakes his head. It feels like flying once you realize you were never holding what you thought. You walk in silence after that. The trail becomes steeper. The air thins. But something inside you expands with each breath, as if the climb is less about altitude and more about space, the space you're making in your own heart by loosening your grip. You reach a ledge. From here, you see the whole valley below, dotted with stone outcroppings and wind-worn trees. A hawk glides beneath you, its wings open, surrendering to the thermals without resistance. Do you see, he asks? You nod. Everything moves. You whisper, and still, everything belongs. He kneels near the edge, drawing a circle in the dust with his finger. At its center, he places a small stone. This is you, he says. Around it, he draws waves, spirals that grow wider with each loop. These are your desires, your fears, your identities, your expectations. They grow, they shift, they fade, but they all come from the same center. He wipes the drawing clean with a sweep of his hand. You stare at the blank dust. That feels like death, you say. He chuckles not unkindly. No, it's freedom. What dies is not you. It's the illusion of what you thought you had to be. You watch the wind erase even the last of the smudges. And what's left, he looks you in the eyes. Peace. You don't argue. You don't agree. You just sit there with him, gazing into the valley, letting the thought steep like tea in your mind. After a long silence, he gestures again. This time, you descend toward a grove of trees that shouldn't be here. Olive and tamarisk, palm and fig. A hidden oasis, breathing with its own rhythm. Water. You hear it before you see it. A gentle burble, like a stream remembering a lullaby. The sound roots your body in the moment. Your breath deepens involuntarily. At the center of the grove, a pool reflects the sky. You kneel beside it, hands cupping water to your face. It's cold, biting, alive. You drink, not with urgency, but reverence. The third noble truth, he says behind you, is that suffering can end. You look up. I want to believe that. You whisper. You don't have to believe. He replies. Just notice. In this moment, is there suffering? You pause. No. Then it's possible. And that's the shift, isn't it? Not grand revelation, not fireworks, but one small yes, one breath where there is no resistance, one sip of cold water that doesn't need to be anything but what it is. You lie down beneath the trees, the bowl still tucked beside you, gold glinting softly through the folds of your satchel. The monk sits nearby, legs crossed, eyes half closed. You mimic him, not perfectly, but with enough presence to feel something stir inside, like a door opening not outward, but inward. You listen to the water, you feel the breeze, and for a while, time disappears, not because you forget it, but because you remember something deeper, that the present isn't a moment, it's a place. And for the first time in a long time, you are home. The air is heavier here, not with heat, but with presence. The grove, nestled into the crook of the mountain, holds itself like a secret kept too long. You rise slowly, brushing the dust from your robes, and look around. It's strange how lushness blooms in the belly of desolation. Palm fronds whisper like old friends trading wisdom. Figs hang low and generous. Beneath your feet, roots press up like ancient veins, reminding you that everything here grew because it yielded to something deeper. The monk motions for you to follow once more. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. You walk in step with him through the shade until you come to a circular clearing. And there, just beyond the pool, you see it, a stone bench, smoothed by time and use. On it sits a woman. She is old, but not fragile. Her spine is straight, and her eyes catch yours with neither invitation nor warning. Just seeing. She nods once, as if she's been expecting you. The monk bows lightly and steps aside. You approach, unsure of protocol, unsure even of why you're here. But she pats the stone beside her, and you sit. You've heard about the end of suffering, she says. Her voice is dry and strong, like a reed flute played on a windless night. But hearing and seeing are not the same. You nod. She gestures to the trees around you. These grew because their seeds broke open, she says, cracked apart in the dark soil. Would you call that suffering? You think about it. It sounds painful. She shrugs. Maybe. But pain is not the same as suffering. Suffering is the story we wrap around pain, the resistance we wrap around change. She leans back, folds her hands. When my daughter died, I wanted the world to stop. I hated time. I hated air. I wanted to freeze the sky so that no one else would smile, so that everything would stay broken like me. She doesn't cry, doesn't flinch, but the world kept going. She continues. The fig still ripened. The palms still swayed. And eventually, I understood the world was not cruel. It was just honest. You look down at your hands. Is that what acceptance looks like, you ask? No, she says. That's what living looks like. A breeze stirs the grove. Somewhere. A bird chirps 3 slow notes, then silence. She reaches down and gathers a handful of dirt, holding it out to you. You take it, feel the weight of it. Gritty, dry, real. Can you hold the dirt and still feel clean? She asks. You don't answer. That's the 4th noble truth, she says, before you can. It's not a promise to avoid the world. It's a way to walk through it without losing your balance. She rises just like that. No long goodbye. She walks toward the trees, becomes shadow, becomes silence. You sit alone, the monk watching from a respectful distance. In your lap, you still hold the dust. And slowly, very slowly, you let it go. The granules fall from your hand and catch the light. Not tragic, not dramatic, just gravity doing its job. You stand, the monk joins you again, and together you begin to walk. The trail now turns inward away from the trees, deeper into a canyon whose walls lean close as if listening. You walk between stone and shade, your thoughts loud against the quiet. The monk breaks it gently. There is an old saying, he begins, that a person sees their reflection only in still water. You glance at the narrow stream curling between the rocks. You can see the sky in it, your face, too, if you lean close. But when the water is stirred, he says, all we see is distortion. You nod, like when the mind is restless. Exactly, he says. And the Eightfold Path is how we still the water. He doesn't recite it, doesn't list the steps like rules on a temple wall. Instead, he gestures to the curve of the trail. Right view is knowing there's a path at all. He says, you step over a root. Right intention is why you're walking. A pebble shifts beneath your foot. Right speech is when you speak truth to yourself and others without harm. You glance back at the words you've swallowed, the ones you've hurled. Right action is what you choose to do when no one watches. He smiles. Right livelihood is how you carry yourself in the world without taking more than you give. The canyon narrows, and sunlight trickles in like threads of gold. Right effort, he continues, is climbing even when you think there's no summit. Right mindfulness, he says, is noticing that you're climbing. And then he stops, turns to you. Right concentration, he says, is being here. Not on the next step, not on the end, not in the memory of the woman or the wish for something different. Just here, right now. The breeze returns, soft as breath. You close your eyes, and in that stillness, you feel something unnameable. Not joy, not peace, something quieter. Like the echo of a bell after it's rung, like the shape your body makes inside a deep breath. The canyon opens again, and in its basin, you find a shrine. Not ornate, not grand. A single stone Buddha, carved rough and worn by time. His eyes closed, his lips not smiling, but serene. You kneel, not out of obedience, but out of stillness. The monk kneels beside you. And there, in that quiet hollow, where time forgets itself, the path becomes less a place and more a presence. You do not need to ask any more questions. Because for once, you are not searching for answers. You are simply here. You are simply breathing. And for now, that is enough. The night doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps into the corners of the canyon like warm ink, as if the sky itself is learning how to exhale. The monk lights a small lantern, oil-fed, barely a flicker, and its glow bounces off the stone walls like the last thoughts before sleep. You've been offered a blanket made of woven palm fibers and coarse cotton. You sit by the fire he builds with practiced ease, 3 stones, dried brush, and the silence of someone who's lit thousands before. He places a kettle over the flames. It hisses as it warms, and the smell of steeped herbs, something earthy, with a trace of sweetness, floats into the air like incense made of memory. "You'll stay the night here," he says, as though you've done this before. Maybe you have. Above, stars begin to scatter themselves into constellations you no longer remember the names of, but the shapes they're familiar. A dipper, a tilted cross, a curve that might be a bow, or a boat, or a breath being held. You sip the tea when it's ready. It's warm and bitter, like honesty. The monk doesn't speak much. He simply gestures toward the stone Buddha again, now resting in the glow of fire and moonlight. Its features seem softer in this light, more human. You know, the monk says eventually. Some think enlightenment is a burst of light, a moment of total understanding, but it's not. It's more like a series of small forgettings. You blink, forgetting what you ask. He looks up at the sky, forgetting who you think you need to be. You sit with that for a while. Let the tea cool between your palms. He continues. "There was once a desert merchant," he says, "who believed his fortune was buried beneath a distant mountain. He sold all he owned, bought supplies, and wandered for years looking for the spot." You nod. You've heard a story like this before, maybe from another monk, another place. But this version feels different, quieter, more tired. He almost died, starved, burned by the sun, lost everything but a single coin in his sash. What happened, you ask, knowing you won't get the answer you expect? He returned home. You wait. And found, the monk says, that his fortune had been under his house the whole time. Not gold, not treasure, just peace. The peace of being done with the search. You stare into the fire, the way it eats the brush slowly, with grace. So it was a waste, you ask? No, he says, refilling your cup. He had to go, to know that there was nowhere else to go. The silence settles again, like the dust of a long walk, but it's softer now, not hollow, more like the pause before music. And when you finally lie down to sleep, you're back against the cool rock, your limbs curled beneath the woven blanket. The monk stays by the fire, legs crossed, gaze steady. He doesn't watch you, not really. He just sits somewhere in the distance. You hear the soft shuffle of a fox, maybe the brush of wind through dry reeds, and you think this is what it means to be held by the earth. Not in the way a child is held, but in the way a riverbed holds water, in the way silence holds thought. As you drift off, you remember the woman in the grove, her cracked palms, the dust in your lap, the feeling of letting it go. That wasn't the end. That was the beginning. You sleep and dream of things that aren't stories, just sounds and impressions and colors that don't need names. When morning comes, it arrives not with urgency, but with golden gentleness. You rise with the monk and fold your blanket. There's no ritual here, no ceremony, just simple actions done with care. You help him gather wood. You refill the water jug, and then you walk. Not because there's somewhere to be, but because your feet remember how. The trail winds upward again, toward a place where the desert touches sky. And as you climb, you talk about nothing in particular types of birds, patterns in stones, the way the wind carries scent. It's the kind of talking that requires no effort because it comes from presence. At a bend in the path, you stop. There's a tree gnarled, half dead, half alive growing out of the cliffside. It shouldn't be there, but it is. Its roots grip the stone with fierce love. You reach out, touch its bark. The monk smiles. You think strength is power, he says, but this tree is strong because it surrendered to what you ask, to what is. The path narrows. Far ahead, you can see a spire of rock, red against the blue. There's a cave, the monk says. We'll rest there, but not yet. He picks up a small stone and hands it to you. Carry this, he says, not because it means something, but because sometimes it helps to carry something. You take it, feel its smooth surface, its cool weight. It feels like a reminder that you're still on the path, that you're still breathing, that you're still becoming, and that for now is enough. The day grows longer in the way only desert days can, by stretching time, not filling it. You continue on, your feet rising and falling over sand that has forgotten its shape 1,000 times. The monk walks ahead, staff tapping the ground like a clock whose ticks are made of wood and patience. You hold the stone he gave you in one hand. It's lighter than you expected, but smooth, worn by water or wind or time. You're not sure. Perhaps all three. Perhaps there's no difference. Ahead, the cave the monk mentioned begins to form out of the rock face. At first, it's just a shadow, a deep breath in the canyon wall. But as you approach, it becomes clearer, wide enough for 2 people to enter, tall enough that even the monk doesn't need to stoop. You step inside. The temperature shifts instantly, the way memory does when you return to a room you once cried in. Cool, hushed, thick with stillness. Your voice doesn't echo here. It gets absorbed. The monk sets down his pack and motions for you to sit. There are small depressions in the cave floor where others have sat before. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Pilgrims, wanderers, those who needed a moment without sky. He sits cross-legged, resting his hands in his lap, and says nothing. So you do the same. At first, your mind twitches. 1,000 small movements, like birds startled into flight. Lists, faces, plans, embarrassments from 3 years ago. Words you wish you'd said, words you wish you hadn't. But slowly, like sand settling after a gust, your thoughts begin to lose their urgency. They still arrive, but they don't stay. You think this is what clouds do? They float, they change. They don't need your opinion. Time passes. Then, the monk speaks. There was a prince, he says, born with 1,000 comforts, silk beds, golden bowls, guards to hold back the world. You don't interrupt. You know who he means. But he left. The monk says, one morning, he looked out and saw sickness. Another morning, he saw death. And on the 3rd morning, he saw a monk. You watch the shadows on the cave wall. What did he see in the monk, you ask? The old man smiles faintly. He saw someone who had stopped running. The cave grows deeper in its silence. Why do we run, you ask? He shrugs. Habit. You lean back against the stone. Let your spine find the truth in it. The prince became the Buddha. The monk continues. but not by magic. By sitting, by breathing, by watching his mind get loud and not reacting. You glance at him. Is that it? Almost, he replies. He also watched his mind get quiet and didn't cling to that either. The shadows have shifted. You can no longer see the entrance. It feels like you're inside the earth's memory, not trapped, just remembered. The monk stands slowly. His joints creak. But there's no complaint in the movement. We rest here not to escape the world, he says, but to see it more clearly. You nod. And when you both leave the cave into sunlight so bright, it feels like forgiveness. You realize something's different. Not louder, not sharper, just slower. Even your breath seems to take its time. The next leg of the journey takes you along a dry riverbed. White stones scatter like teeth. Occasionally, the monk stops to point something out, a lizard sunbathing on a flat rock, a hawk circling high above, a patch of moss stubbornly clinging to a shaded nook. He does not explain these things. He simply shares them. See, he says, not know, not understand, just see. You begin to notice how many things don't need commentary to matter. Hours pass. The sun tilts westward, and eventually, you arrive at a shaded alcove where 3 other travelers sit around a low stone table. 2 women and a man. They wear robes like the monks, but their eyes carry different stories. One of the women nods toward you, another seeker. The monk nods back, a wanderer. No one asks why you're here. No one asks your name. The woman gestures to a place beside her. You sit. She offers you dried dates from a small basket. Sweet and tough, like truths worth chewing. The conversation is minimal, and when it happens, it floats like leaves on still water. Someone asks a riddle. Someone else tells a story about a fox who outwitted a tiger by pretending to be a sage. You smile. The laughter is real, but gentle like wind-rustling linen. Later, the group begins to chant, not words, exactly. Sounds. Hummed syllables that rise and fall in a cadence older than language. You join in, unsure at first, but then you let go of trying to get it right. And the sound carries you, like a boat, like breath. When the chanting ends, the woman beside you places a hand over her heart, closes her eyes for a moment, and then begins to serve soup from a battered pot. You'll sleep here tonight, the monk says, with them. He does not say he'll stay, and you don't ask. The others unroll mats. No one tells anyone else what to do. You watch the fire burn low. You remember the weight of the stone in your pocket, the cave, the prince who sat until the noise faded. And as your eyes begin to close, you think, maybe I've stopped running too. Maybe just for tonight. And maybe that's enough. Morning arrives, not with urgency, but with a hush. One by one, the others stir from their mats, moving as though the silence is a fragile thread that must not be broken. The woman who offered you dates the night before begins sweeping the ground around the camp with a branch broom. The man prepares tea. No one speaks yet, but it doesn't feel like absence. It feels like reverence. You rise slowly, brushing the sleep from your face with a palm still warm from dreams. Your joints complain a little, but there's a softness to even that, a gentle reminder that you are here, still breathing, still becoming. The monk is gone. No note, no farewell. Just a warm circle in the sand where he'd slept, and the faintest imprint of where his staff had leaned. You do not panic. You do not question, because something inside you already knows he's not far. And even if he were, the journey was never about following someone else forever. You pack your things with care, including the small stone he gave you. It feels heavier today, not burdensome, just more real. As you prepare to leave, the woman walks up to you with a small pouch. Inside are dried herbs and crushed petals. She doesn't explain. You bow slightly in thanks. She nods once and turns away, already returning to the simple rhythm of sweeping. The path forward is narrow and winding. You walk alone now, but strangely, you don't feel alone. Every footstep seems to echo with the memory of another someone who walked this before, or perhaps someone yet to come. The canyon walls begin to widen, revealing strange formations of rock carved by wind and time. Some look like animals caught mid-run. Others resemble faces, half erased by forgetfulness. It feels like the landscape is teaching you something. You don't rush to define what. There's a pool ahead, a rare thing in this land. Just a shimmer of green-blue tucked beneath an overhang. The water is still, so still it reflects the sky perfectly. So perfectly, you feel as though stepping in would take you upward, not down. You kneel and cup your hands. The water is cold, alive. You drink. And for the first time in days, you see your reflection, not just your face, but your expression. Different, softer, less gripped. You blink. The image ripples, then reforms. Across the water, seated on a boulder, is a woman. Not the one from camp. Older, wrapped in a shawl that looks like it's made from the evening itself. She's been watching you. You don't speak, neither does she. Instead, she slowly unwraps a bundle and reveals a small scroll. Unrolls it. On the scroll is a drawing. A tree. But not just any tree. The tree. The one from the canyon wall, with the gnarled roots clinging to stone. You recognize it instantly. You step forward, heart quickening. How do you know she raises one hand? Palm out. Not to stop you, to slow you. She points at the tree on the scroll, then at your chest, and then she smiles. Not a wide smile, a knowing one, the kind that makes words unnecessary. You understand? The tree isn't just in the canyon, it's in you. She stands, wraps the scroll, and walks away. Her shadow long and quiet. You do not follow. Instead, you remain there by the pool for a long time, watching the sky shift in its reflection, watching your own shape come and go with each ripple. You place the stone the monk gave you beside the water, not out of dismissal, out of gratitude, and you walk on. The terrain becomes harsher again, fewer plants, more jagged rocks. But something in your gait has changed. You no longer step as though the earth might collapse beneath you. You trust it. A storm looms ahead, not one of thunder, but of wind. Sand swirls and spirals around your feet, painting patterns that vanish before you can trace them. You find a small outcrop and take shelter. The storm doesn't rage. It whispers. The sand hisses past the stone, like voices too far away to make out, but too close to ignore. You rest there for hours, perhaps longer. Time bends in the storm, and when it clears, the world has changed. The air is sharper, the sky deeper. Your face is covered in fine dust. You do not brush it away. You carry it. You reach a ridge. Below lies a valley you've never seen. though something about it feels familiar, as if your bones have dreamt of it. A cluster of low trees, a few tents, the glimmer of metal cooking pots catching sunlight. You descend slowly. The people there do not look up at first. They are busy with small tasks weaving, kneading dough, patching cloth. It's a village made of attention. You are greeted not with questions, but with space. Someone hands you a piece of flatbread. Another pours water into a clay bowl and sets it in front of you. No one rushes. No one watches to see if you understand how to belong. You eat. You drink. You sit. Eventually, a child approaches you. He's holding a small wooden object, an animal carved roughly, with wide feet and big eyes. He hands it to you without explanation and then runs off, chasing a dog. You hold the toy in your lap, and for some reason, it makes you want to cry. Not from sadness, from stillness, from knowing, without being told, that you've arrived somewhere you didn't know you were seeking. You sit there, watching life unfold around you like a windless flag. A woman humming as she braids her hair. A man repairing a sandal with slow, deliberate stitches. A girl whispering into a goat's ear. And for the first time in a long while, you feel no urgency to move forward. You simply are. As the sun dips behind the hills, a bell rings a soft chime, not a call. You follow the others toward a gathering circle. In the center is a fire, and around it, people sit, eyes closed, hands resting, breathing. You join them, and together, you begin again. No chance, no doctrine, just breath, shared breath, and the quiet certainty of being home at least for now. You awaken before the others. There's a silence in this valley that is different from the desert silence. It's not vast and echoing. It's woven from the soft murmur of leaves shifting in the dawn breeze, the hushed rhythm of a goat's breath, and the faint thud of a pestle tapping in a distant mortar. The coals from last night's fire still smolder. You stir them gently with a stick. Small sparks leap like startled fireflies, then vanish. You're offered tea before you ask. An old woman nods and hands you a clay cup, her fingers curled with the bends of time. The tea is bitter, with something floral hiding at the edge. You sip slowly, savoring its warmth against the morning chill. Across the circle, a boy is drawing in the sand. His fingertip moves with precision, tracing spirals and loops that never quite repeat. You move closer, drawn not just by curiosity, but by the rhythm of his attention. He doesn't look up, just gestures toward the sand. You kneel beside him, watching the lines emerge. And then, without thinking, you place your own finger down and begin to draw. A leaf, a mountain, a wave. The boy smiles. Not because of your skill, but because you joined. You sit there drawing for some time. The designs blur and fade as the wind picks up, but neither of you tries to preserve them. Everything impermanent. And that's okay. Eventually, someone calls gently one of the villagers, pointing toward the western ridge. You follow the path they indicate, up a slope painted with moss and loose stones. You're not told why, but your legs move with certainty now. At the summit is a small wooden post, half buried in sand. You wouldn't notice it if you weren't looking. There's a scroll attached, rolled tightly, bound with string. You untie it. Inside, a map, not of the land, but of the wind. Strange. you think. But the longer you study it, the more it makes sense. Lines curve, not where geography demands, but where currents flow. It shows you how the wind carves passageways through time and patience, how the air has its own memory, how every gust is a messenger. You look up, the wind brushes your face, and now, when you close your eyes, you feel it the direction it invites you to walk. You roll the map and slip it into your pack. The next few days are quiet, gentle. You help repair a tent seam. You trade a story for a loaf of bread. You listen as two elders debate the nature of joy, laughing halfway through like neither one actually needs to be right. You sleep beneath open skies, stars spilling across your dreams. And always, there is the sound of breath, yours, theirs, the earth's. Then, one morning, the bell does not ring. Instead, a traveler enters the camp. He's older, lean, dressed in linen dyed the color of dusk. On his back is a bundle of bamboo flutes. He does not speak. He plays. The music curls around you like incense smoke, delicate and stubborn. It doesn't demand attention, but it holds it anyway. You sit, eyes closed, and listen. The melody does something to your chest. It unwinds it, like a knot loosening, like a breath you didn't realize you were holding. When he finishes, he walks directly to you and offers a flute. You shake your head. I don't know how. He shrugs and walks away. That night, when all are asleep, you sit alone near the fire and lift the flute to your lips. The first sound is awkward, a wheeze. The second, too sharp. But the third hums, not a tune, just a note. A long, low, imperfect note. And somehow, it feels like a beginning. The days blend after that, not into monotony, but into flow. You learn that rhythm isn't always about drums or footsteps. It can be the way a meal is prepared or how a blanket is folded. You begin to notice the difference between stillness and stagnation. Stillness is alive. You carry water, you stir lentils, you mend a tear in your shirt. One night, during a full moon, the villagers gather around the fire again. The flutist plays, but this time he is joined by a woman with a drum and a child who hums. It's not coordinated, it's not rehearsed, but it works. You don't just listen, you feel it ripple through you, like the wind from the canyon, or the hush of the monastery garden long ago. Someone hands you a bowl of rice, and you realize something. You've gone many days without seeking, without questioning the path. You've simply lived. That night, you dream of the monk again. He's seated on the same boulder as before, gazing at the desert sky. But now, he turns to you and smiles, not in greeting, but in recognition. You've stopped running, he says. You want to ask what happens next, but you don't. You wake with the sun on your face, your hands open, palms facing skyward. You leave the village the next morning, not because you're restless, but because the wind has shifted. No one says goodbye. They don't need to. On the ridge, you look back once, and then you keep walking. The land before you is new, craggy hills with scattered trees, their roots grasping stone like fingers remembering. The path narrows, then broadens, then vanishes, and still, you walk. One night, you find a cave, small, dark, echoing. Inside is a candle still burning. You sit, you rest your flute on your knees, and then, without plan, you play. Not for anyone, not even for yourself. You You play for the space between things, and when the candle flickers out, you are not afraid. Darkness is only another form of knowing. By morning, the cave has cooled. Your breath curls in the air like slow smoke. Outside, dawn stains the sky in copper and lavender streaks. The land below shifts again, no longer desert, not quite forest. Rolling hills dappled with shrubs, clusters of eucalyptus trees rising like quiet sentinels. You feel the difference in the air. Thicker, damp, as if the world is inhaled and hasn't exhaled yet. You follow a narrow path marked only by worn footprints and bent grass. The earth beneath you squelches faintly in places, softened by recent rain. At mid-morning, a soft chime echoes in the air. You freeze. Then you hear it again, wind through metal, hollow and kind. You follow it until you find the source, a field of hanging bells. No wall, no gate. Just hundreds of bronze and iron bells strung from crooked wooden posts. Tall grasses swaying between them, some large as lanterns, some small as thimbles. Each one rings with its own voice. You walk slowly through the field, brushing your fingertips over their sides. The tones they make are not loud, but they linger. A monk emerges from the far end. His robes are the soft gray of ash, and his face is carved with quiet laughter lines. You came on the wind, he says simply, as if you were expected. You nod, because you did. He leads you along a path flanked by mossy stones, up to a hermitage tucked beneath the shoulder of a hill. A simple roof of thatch, a small garden, one woven mat placed just so beneath a pine tree that leans a little too far. The hermit gestures for you to sit, and then he leaves. No questions, no instructions, just silence. It stretches long. At first, your thoughts roar. Am I doing this right? Should I help with something? Is this some kind of test? But the longer you sit, the more those thoughts lose urgency. Eventually, you lie back on the mat. A pine needle floats down and lands on your nose. You laugh aloud. The sound feels foreign and good. That evening, the hermit returns with a bowl of broth and some rice. He says nothing, but the meal is warm and grounding. You eat slowly, listening to the frogs begin their nightly chant from the marsh below. As night settles in, you think back to your journey so far, the hot sands, the wandering musicians, the fire-lit teachings, the sound of flutes and footsteps and stories. And in that remembering, you feel something unspoken begin to thread it all together. You're not accumulating wisdom like coins in a jar. You're shedding layers, questions, even the need for answers. Just after dawn, the hermit finally speaks again. His voice is papery, but kind. There are 3 kinds of silence, he says. You sit up. He doesn't explain. Not yet. He walks to the garden and begins to weed. You join him. The soil is soft. Earthworms curl and uncurl like tiny questions with no punctuation. You dig gently, pulling weeds from their roots, placing them in a basket. Hours pass. Later, as the sun climbs higher, you sit beneath the pine again. The hermit hands you a stone. First silence, he says, is the silence of words. You already know this. You nod. That part's easy. Silence from speech. He takes the stone and tosses it lightly into a shallow basin of water. Ripples bloom outward, overlapping. Second silence, he says, is of thought, harder to reach. But you've brushed it in moments. You breathe. Then he places the stone back in your hand. The third silence he doesn't speak of. Not because he forgets, but because words will never fit it. Instead, he leaves you with the stone and walks into the house. You sit with it, staring at its rough surface, noticing its weight. You balance it on one finger. It's not heavy, but it demands your attention. You carry it with you the next morning when you leave. A new trail unfolds dense forest, soft soil underfoot, and birds whose songs sound like laughter. Here, everything seems to breathe slower. You come to a river, not wide, but swift. No bridge, no path across. So you sit and wait. Eventually, a woman arrives, pulling a cart of vegetables. She sees you, assesses the river, then walks upstream without a word. You follow. A narrow fallen log spans the current, slick with moss, wobbly. She crosses it barefoot, cart and all. You look at the river again, then your feet, then the sky. Then you begin, halfway across. The wind rises. You wobble. You freeze. Then you remember the bell field the way each bell sang, even when shaken. So you let yourself shake, and you make it across. On the other side, the woman smiles, tosses you a small turnip from her cart, and continues walking. You hold it in your hand like a gift or a riddle. At a bend in the trail, you come across a tree stump carved into a seat. You sit, bite into the turnip. It's crisp, earthy, unexpectedly sweet. You lean back. The sky through the branches is a patchwork of gold and green. You close your eyes, just for a moment, and the third silence. It brushes against your cheek, like wind from nowhere, like a bell ringing long after it's stopped, like truth that doesn't need to be named. When you wake, the sun is filtering softly through the leaves. Birds call to one another like children playing tag, darting from branch to branch. The tree stump beneath you is warm now, and your back has molded perfectly to its shape. You stretch slowly, like someone remembering their body after a long dream. The third silence still lingers somewhere behind your ears, like an echo you don't want to disturb. You rise and continue walking, your feet padding across the pine needle-strewn trail. The turnip is gone, but you feel nourished, not just in body, something else. Deeper down the path, you hear a soft rushing, like wind, but heavier. A waterfall. You quicken your steps, and soon, there it is, a curtain of silver crashing into a wide pool. The mist kissing your face. It's hidden in a narrow glade, surrounded by stone terraces etched with moss and time. You sit at its edge, close enough to feel the rhythm of the spray. And suddenly, the sound isn't just water, it's teaching. The waterfall is relentless, powerful, yet soft. It reminds you of what the Buddha once said about suffering. It flows constantly, unless you see its source. You close your eyes and breathe with the sound. One inhale for the rush, one exhale for the stillness. You remember the monk in the canyon speaking of the Four Noble Truths. Suffering, its cause, its end, the path. Here, it feels less like theory, more like texture, something the water has known forever. A child appears beside you. You didn't hear her approach. Her feet are bare, her robe of faded saffron. She doesn't speak, just looks at you. Then the waterfall, then back to you. You nod. She sits. She pulls a round pebble from her pocket and tosses it into the pool. You watch the ripples. They reach far, overlapping endlessly. She looks at you again. Karma, she says, pointing at the ripples. Not punishment, just patterns. Then she gets up and runs away. Arms spread like wings. You stay, listening to the water's 1,000 voices. Later, as the sun climbs high, you rise again and continue down the path. The sound of the waterfall fades behind you, but the rhythm of it lingers in your breath. You walk until the trees thin out, and the land stretches wide, a vast meadow of tall grass, swaying in long, synchronized waves. In the distance, you spot smoke rising from a chimney, a monastery. It sits in the valley, like a sleeping ox, low, humble, sturdy. Stone walls patched with ivy. A bell tower, carved from wood, leaning slightly, yet standing strong. As you approach, a monk greets you not with words, but with a bow. You bow in return. He beckons, and you follow. Inside the monastery, everything is slow. Footsteps echo softly on stone. Robes whisper as they pass. The air smells of sandalwood and tea leaves. You are offered a room, a bed made of straw, a wooden bowl, a window facing east. Each item is placed deliberately, as though blessed by intention. There are no clocks, no mirrors. Time here moves like breath unhurried, unnoticed. At dawn, you rise with the bell and join the monks in the zendo. It's your first time sitting among so many others. Back straight, legs folded, hands resting like petals. No one speaks. And yet, everything is said. The stillness feels collective, like an invisible thread tying you all together. As the days pass, your body adjusts to the rhythm walking meditation at dawn, chanting before meals, silent work in the gardens, raking stones, washing bowls, sweeping leaves that will only fall again tomorrow. At first, it feels repetitive, but then you see it. Repetition is not monotony, it is refinement. Each motion carves away a little more of what isn't needed. You remember sweeping leaves when you first arrived. You rushed. Now, you move slower, not from fatigue, but from care. Each leaf swept is not a task. It's a conversation. You learn to listen to the broom's sound, the weight of your hand, the scent of morning. One day, while weeding the path near the temple gate, you uncover a stone, smooth, worn, and familiar. You smile. It's the same kind of stone the hermit gave you. You place it on the altar in your room, beside your water bowl. At night, you lie awake, not because you can't sleep, but because you don't need to rush into it. You lie still, eyes open, watching the moonlight shift across the ceiling. You think of the desert, of the flute player, of the sandstorm that told you to stop searching and start seeing, of the silence that came in threes. You realize something. The silence never left. It only changed rooms. The monks here don't preach. They don't explain. They live, and let the living do the teaching. One monk, a younger one with wild hair and a mischievous smirk, befriends you. He doesn't say much, but when he does, it's often strange. You can't fix the sky, he says once, while watching clouds. You laugh, but the next morning, you understand. You see a novice trying to chase away a crow from the garden, yelling, waving, stomping. The crow caws louder, bolder, and you remember, let the sky be the sky. Eventually, the crow leaves, not because it was chased, but because it chose to. One evening, during walking meditation, you step off the path and follow a deer, just a few paces. No one stops you. The deer pauses, glances back, then disappears into the trees. You don't follow. You just stand there among the shadows and listen to the wind move through the pines. You place your hand on a tree trunk, rough bark, steady warmth, stillness beneath motion. You realize you've stopped needing answers, not because you have them, but because the questions have softened. You wake before the bell. The world is still hushed, cloaked in that soft gray light that only exists between night and morning. Outside your small window, the horizon blushes pink, like the earth inhaling slowly after a long sleep. You sit up on your straw mat. No alarm, no compulsion, just presence. You wash your face with cool water from the basin. The droplets feel like messages from a mountain spring. You smile not because there's something funny, but because your breath feels exactly right. In the courtyard, others begin to gather. The morning bell hasn't rung yet, but it doesn't need to. You move not by schedule, but by rhythm. Inside the zendo, you take your seat, spine tall, shoulders soft, chin gently tucked. One breath, another, then the bell, and then nothing except breath, silence, the occasional creak of a wooden floorboard, the soft clink of someone adjusting their seat. This is not performance. This is not achievement. This is just being. Your thoughts, of course, do not vanish. No miracle occurs, but the space between them grows, like clouds drifting apart to let sky show through. And every so often, you remember thoughts are not intrusions. They are guests. You greet them, then let them go. After the sit, the day unfolds in its usual quiet pattern, sweeping, eating, tending to the garden. You rake the pebbled path with care, not because it must be tidy, but because the motion is the lesson. You remember the story an elder monk told last night, just before the lights dimmed. It wasn't really a story, more like a memory wrapped in metaphor. He said one day, I tried to count the leaves in the courtyard. I got to 100 before the wind started blowing. The next day, I did it again. I got to 80 before I sneezed. On the third day, I didn't count at all. I just watched the leaves dance. That was the first day I understood anything at all. You had smiled when he said it, but today, while raking, you feel it. You stop counting. You just rake and listen and breathe. That evening, something shifts. You're invited to the head monk's quarters. Not an interrogation, just tea. The room is small, sparse. One cushion, one candle, one scroll. He pours 2 cups. You sip together in silence. After a while, he speaks. I heard you came through the desert. You nod. And what did you find? You don't answer right away. You look at the tea's steam rising in delicate spirals. I found sand, you say, and the sound of my own footsteps. He smiles. Good. He offers no further comment, no affirmation, no riddle, just tea. You sit a while longer. The candles flame, bobbing slightly with every draft. Before you leave, he adds tomorrow. There is a walk, a long one. You should come. You bow. Sleep comes easily that night. When you rise, the world is mist-wrapped, as if the valley itself is exhaling. You join the group gathering by the gate, a dozen monks, young and old. The head monk is there, staff in hand. The walk begins. Not a hike, not a destination, just steps, left, right, breath. You pass through pine forest, then olive groves, then winding trails skirting cliffs where eagles soar silently above. No one speaks. It's not a vow, it's just unnecessary. Your feet find the earth's rhythm. Stones roll beneath your heel, and you learn to trust your toes more than your eyes. Around midday, you reach a ridge overlooking a wide plain. There, the head monk gestures for everyone to sit. The view stretches for miles. Patches of forest, a winding river, distant villages that look like sand-colored dots. He doesn't point to any of it. Instead, he says, "This is your mind." Then he closes his eyes. You do too. At first, your mind resists categorizing what you saw: plains, trees, possible routes. But slowly, the mental noise fades, and you feel the vastness of that plain inside you. Open, quiet, without border, you remain seated for what feels like a lifetime, or maybe just a few minutes. Time has become less important than texture. When you open your eyes, the sun is starting its descent. The return walk is slower, not from exhaustion, from reverence. That evening, over rice and broth, no one speaks of the ridge. There is nothing to say. Later, alone in the garden, you spot a cricket perched on a leaf. It rubs its wings, and for a moment, the sound reminds you of the flute in the desert. Same tone, same yearning. You sit beside it and listen. You think about all the teachings you've received on this path, some through words, some through silence, many through repetition. And now, something occurs to you. Maybe Zen isn't about discovering new truths. Maybe it's about remembering old ones your body already knows. The way a child knows balance before anyone teaches them the word gravity. You lie on your back and watch the stars blink awake. Each one seems to pulse with a question you no longer need answered. Tomorrow, you'll rise again. Not to progress, not to achieve, just to walk, to sweep, to sip tea, to breathe, and to forget you're doing any of it. Morning again. You wake to birdsong and the weightless hush of fog creeping through the trees. The monastery is wrapped in a pale stillness, as if nature itself has paused to exhale. Your breath feels anchored, deep and slow, as though overnight your body remembered something your mind had forgotten. You rise without rush, letting the rhythm of the day begin you rather than the other way around. At breakfast, the rice is warm and gently sticky. You notice the shape of the bowl, the wear on the chopsticks, the swirl of steam rising like incense. No one speaks, yet everything feels spoken for. Even silence feels shared, like a warm blanket passed hand to hand. After the morning sit, you help in the storage hut, stacking winter blankets, checking rain barrels, sorting donated scrolls. An elderly monk shows you how to fold properly, one crease at a time. No hurry. As he moves, it feels like a dance. As if folding a robe is not a chore, but a ceremony. Later that morning, while sweeping the garden path, you hear the head monk calling your name. He's standing beneath a cherry tree, hands tucked inside his sleeves. The wind has carried petals onto his shoulders, like a blessing he hasn't noticed. "We're expecting a guest," he says. "A wanderer, like you once were." You nod. "Who is it?" He smiles. "I don't know yet, but I trust the wind." He asks you to prepare a room. Not just clean it, but prepare it. Thoughtfully. Intentionally. So you do. You sweep the floorboards with a handmade straw broom, then wipe them down with warm, cedar-scented cloth. You set out a bowl for washing, a cushion for sitting, A single flower in a chipped vase. Every gesture becomes an offering not to impress, but to welcome. That afternoon, the wanderer arrives. Sunburnt cheeks, dusty robe, eyes that dart like birds before they rest. She bows deeply, not because she must, but because she can. You lead her to the room you prepared, then bring her tea. She doesn't speak much, but thanks you with her eyes. In her, you see yourself not in the face, not in the footsteps, but in the restlessness beneath it all, that soft tremor of seeking. And just like that, you understand the gift the head monk gave you. He let you give shelter. That night, during the closing chant, you find your voice steady and clear. You're not singing for yourself, or even for the Buddha. You're singing to hold the space for everyone. The next morning, the wanderer joins the work crews. She digs with vigor, a bit too fast. The elder monk beside her chuckles gently. Faster doesn't get you there quicker, he says, handing her a canteen. Only deeper. You see her pause, nod, adjust her pace. It's small, but noticeable. Later, while hauling kindling, you hear her laugh softly at herself when she drops an armful of wood. Not frustration, just laughter, like a bell shaking off dust. In the zendo that evening, she takes a seat near the back. Her posture wobbles. Her eyes flutter open, then close again. You resist the urge to correct her. You remember your own wobbles. You remember the kindness of those who let you wobble in peace. That night, the head monk calls you again. This time, no tea, just a slow walk beneath the stars. I think she'll be fine, he says after a while. She's got questions, but fewer than she thinks. You nod. And you, he adds, what's your question these days? You walk a little farther before answering. I'm not sure I have one anymore. You say, just a willingness to keep listening. He nods. That's enough. You return to your room and light a candle. The flame wavers gently, as if it too is practicing stillness. You sit on the mat, but not to meditate, just to rest in the glow. Your hands rest open in your lap. Your back straightens without effort, and for the first time, it occurs to you maybe the desert didn't give you anything new. Maybe it burned away what you didn't need. And maybe that's the real teaching, not gaining, but shedding. Outside, the wind picks up. It rustles the old prayer flags strung across the garden, each one faded, frayed, and full of blessing. You fall asleep, not from exhaustion, but from peace. No dreams, just the soft exhale of the world. You awaken before the bell. The sky outside your window is an inky navy, pierced by only a few early stars. Inside the monastery, it's quiet, so quiet that your own breathing sounds like ocean waves crashing gently on a distant shore. You sit before the altar in your room, not to pray, but to be still. There is no goal, no expectation, just the presence of you and the candle's last flicker as it yields to the coming light. At the zendo, you're not the first one there. She is, the wanderer from yesterday now, kneeling in perfect silence, her back slightly hunched, but her breath steady. You nod to her as you pass. She doesn't nod back. She doesn't need to. There's something deeply reassuring about seeing someone else find their rhythm. In the kitchen that morning, you stir rice slowly, watching the grains swirl like thoughts in your mind, rising, falling, separating, joining. The steam fogs your glasses. If you wear them, it fogs the window regardless. Outside, a crow lands on the sill, tilts its head at you, and departs. The head monk assigns you to water duty a full circuit of the garden barrels, ponds, and channels that keep the monastery's delicate balance. You carry the old wooden dipper, refilling as needed, testing each vessel with a practiced eye. Water flows where it's welcome and stagnates where it's not. You pass the old fig tree where a bench has been carved from stone. There, the storyteller sits. You've only seen him once or twice, a quiet monk with few duties but a mind as sharp as obsidian. He motions for you to join him. "I hear you've been wandering less these days," he says, voice like gravel wrapped in honey. You nod. He glances at your dipper. "Water doesn't rush," he says, "but it doesn't forget." You sit with that thought a while. Let it settle like silt. Then he speaks again. "Tell me, what was the moment? When did your wandering stop feeling like escape and start feeling like return?" You blink. The answer is both recent and ancient. Maybe it was the date palm in the desert. Maybe it was the bowl you placed for the wanderer. Maybe it hasn't happened yet. I'm not sure. You say softly. He smiles. Good. That afternoon, the sky turns. Winds arrive from the mountain pass carrying dust, leaves, and the scent of a storm. Monks move together like a murmuration of starlings, tying shut doors, bringing in robes from the lines, checking the thatch. Rain arrives, in silence first, then with a whisper, then a roar. You stand beneath the eaves, watching the garden darken. Puddles form like mirrors, reflecting the flickering lanterns hung near the paths. You watch one drop fall, hit, ripple, and then another, and another. Infinite circles, dancing into each other, each ripple changing the others, but none claiming more space than it needs. That night, the power flickers. A monk taps your shoulder. "Can you fetch the oil lamps?" You do, bringing them from the storeroom, one by one, lighting them from the main flame. Each new flame is born from the same source, yet each burns in its own time. In the hallway, you pass the wanderer again. Her hair is wet, robe clinging at the shoulders. She smiles. "I slipped in the garden," she says. You almost respond with a lecture, but you stop. You nod instead. "Everyone slips." She laughs. "I think I slipped into something deeper." You smile with her. There's nothing more to say. That evening, the monks gather in the main hall for storm meditation. The wind hammers the shutters, thunder rumbles, but inside just breath, just presence. You close your eyes and listen to the storm, to the silence, to the space between, and somewhere in that space, you sense something vast, a presence not outside you, but not inside you either. Just everywhere. Like the wind, like the rain, like the Dharma. It's not dramatic, not loud, but it's there. And in that moment, you know this too as a teaching. The storm does not ask permission to pass. It simply comes, and it simply goes. Later, as the rain thins to mist, you slip out to the garden. The world smells new, clean, not improved, just unveiled. You kneel by the fig tree and press your palm to the wet earth. It welcomes you. It doesn't need to understand you. It just holds. In the end, that's what you found, isn't it? Not answers, not proof, but ground. Firm enough to kneel on, soft enough to sink into. Dawn comes gently, The sky is the color of pale silk, streaked with the soft brush strokes of clouds. Birds resume their chatter in the distance, the kind of chatter that sounds more like gossip than music, though it somehow fits the morning. You rise before the bell again without hesitation, without decision, not because someone told you to, not because it's your duty, but because this is simply what the morning invites. In the courtyard, puddles remain from the storm, glistening in the soft light. The flagstones are damp beneath your sandals. Every step leaves a mark, but only for a moment. Already, the sun is drying the earth. The air smells of cedar and wet stone. You find yourself drawn to the outer fields today, beyond the monastery's well-tended gardens, where the wild grasses have grown thick and lush. You volunteer to help the novice monks repair the path that's begun to wash out in the rains. Pickaxe in hand, you dig, not with frustration, not with a goal. Just dig, one stroke at a time, a steady breath, a clear rhythm. After a while, your muscles no longer resist. The body finds its own pace, and the mind, surprisingly, grows quiet. You are the digging. You are the rhythm. You are the air moving in and out of lungs. It's strange how much peace there is in ordinary labor when done with presence. The head monk walks past, nodding approvingly, but says nothing. His silence is worth more than 1,000 instructions. You remember what the old wanderer told you beneath the date palm. You don't need to find the Buddha. Just stop clinging to what isn't him. At the time, it confused you. But now, you're not clinging. You're not seeking either. You're just here. Later that afternoon, you're assigned to walk into the nearby village with 2 others to deliver medicines and dried tea. It's a winding path through bamboo groves, along the river that cuts the valley like a silver ribbon. You walk in single file, not because you must, but because it suits the shape of the trail and the silence you carry with you. At the edge of the village, a child runs up to you, barefoot and laughing, holding out a flower as large as her head. She places it in your hand and runs off without a word. You don't know what it means. You don't need to. You hold the flower like a koan absurd, beautiful, unsolvable, and complete in its mystery. The villagers welcome you warmly. An old man insists you sit and drink with him. His wife offers hot rice cakes filled with sesame. You accept, not out of politeness, but gratitude. Their dog circles your leg twice before curling up at your feet. You realize something. Quite suddenly, the world is not asking you to be holy, only honest, only here. The walk back is longer. One of the monks has a limp today, so you slow your pace. No one complains. No one counts steps. Back at the monastery, you light a small lantern near the meditation hall, though the sun hasn't yet fully gone. You light it anyway, not because of darkness, but as a reminder of attention, of warmth, of passing things. That evening, there's a communal tea ceremony. It's simple, no grand ritual, no fancy robes, just shared space, shared breath. The storyteller monk speaks briefly. There's a point on every journey, he says, where the traveler forgets he is traveling. He just walks, just eats, just smiles when smiled at. That's when he begins to understand what never moved. You sip your tea. Bitter, then sweet. You sleep that night without dreams. There's no need for them. This is the dream. A clear path through the desert of your thoughts. A palm tree offering shade to no one in particular. A stranger sharing bread without asking your name. The Buddha appearing not in robes or firelight, but in every small act done without expectation. You wake just before midnight, not startled, not restless. You rise, step outside. The sky is moonless. The stars blaze with the same intensity they always have, though you notice them differently now. Not as pinpricks in a dark ceiling, but as reminders of boundlessness. You return inside, close the door, and lie back down. No bells ring. No lessons remain. Only the breath. Only the ground. Only the peace of one who has wandered far enough to know there is nowhere else to go. And now, as our story gently releases its final breath, let us return slowly, without urgency, to the quiet space where it all began. You are no longer in a desert, nor in a monastery, not even beside the fig tree or among the bamboo. You are simply here, wherever you are, cocooned in blankets, your head nestled into the pillow. Feel the body soften. Let your jaw release. Let your shoulders sink. Let the long road of thought untangle behind you, like a scroll being rolled up for the night. You've journeyed far, through heat and silence, through uncertainty and simplicity, through teachings that did not shout but whispered, quietly enough for the heart to hear. And in all of this, one truth remains. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be fixed. In this moment, just as it is, you are already whole. Let go of the questions. Let go of the striving. Feel how each breath arrives like a small boat on a still lake gliding in, pausing, and then gently departing. No fanfare, no resistance. This is the teaching that lingers when the words fade, the wind changes, but the sky remains. Thoughts come, but awareness is untouched. You are not the storm. You are not the silence. You are the stillness beneath both. So rest now in that place deeper than understanding. Let each muscle remember what it means to trust the earth. Let each bone soften like candle wax, warmed by presence. You have nothing to prove here. No more miles to walk. No more sand in your shoes. Just sleep. Soft, honest sleep. The kind that doesn't chase dreams, but welcomes them. If they come like guests arriving late to a party where no one needs to speak, let your breath grow longer, your pulse slower. Let the hum of your own being blend into the background, like crickets in summer or wind through pine. You're home, not because of a place, but because of the knowing that whatever arises, it too shall pass. And whatever you are beneath name, beneath roles, beneath time, does not need to be named to be real. You've walked well. May the teachings stay with you, not as words, but as the ease between them. Everything is as it should be. Good night, dear one. Sweet dreams.